Make up mind. Fight.
Who doesn't love Australiums? Well, I mean, okay, I don't own any anymore due to generally preferring the more expanded variety of skins, but for a few years there, Australiums were the endgame of TF2 weapon trading, and are still the ultimate way to flex that you do in fact main a class. I've had quite a few Australiums in my day, with the first one being an Australium Tomislav that actually helped spur me to pick up Heavy as my main, and recently I've been looking over each class's Australium options a lot, and wondering if it's about time to go gold mining again. But that got me thinking. Each class has 2 or 3 Australium to their name, covering some of their most iconic weapons, but what if they each had one more? What if each TF2 class, by some miracle TF2 update in the year of our Lord 2020 whatever, received one new Australium in their lineup? Well, that's what I'm here to discuss today. I want to give my picks for what the best choice for one new Australium for each class would be. The main metrics I'm determining to use this are iconography, levels of use, and design. For instance, it's easy to say that the sniper should get an Australium Girardi because it's one of the most iconic weapons in the game, but how would that really look? I'm going to try and pick a weapon for each class that's identifiable as an iconic or meta part of their lineup, that's often used by players of the class, and that's design would fit the Australium mold well. Also, no stock weapons, as then we just end up talking about each class's stock melee, and also no multi-class weapons. With obvious exception to the frying pan, Valve seems to be generally averse to adding the concept of multi-class Australiums to the game, and I'll be respecting that in this video. All that said, let's roll. For Scout, I'm choosing to go with the Boston Basher. I battled with the choices on this one for a bit, as he already has 2 primaries as his current Australiums, and a lot of his secondaries are consumables or throwables, which would lessen the appeal of just looking at them since you're meant to have them out of your hands most of the time. A lot of his other melee weapons as well wouldn't really lend themselves well to the Australium mold. The Boston Basher, though, could easily work. Not only is it one of Scout's best and most popular melees, especially at high levels of play, but it would also just look really cool as an Australium. We can go down 3 roads here. Either make the entire thing gold, which is my least favorite, make just the spikes gold, which would be admittedly stylish, but also make it kind of hard to see at a distance, or my favorite, make the bat itself gold, but make the spikes a much darker shade of gray or black. Not only would it make it more immediately recognizable as an Australium, but also give it a very appealing gold and black color scheme that some other Aussies take advantage of really well. Scout has kind of a deficit of choices, all things considered, but I think the Boston Basher is the best overall. Soldier is in a similar position to Scout, as he has 2 primary Australiums and lots of secondaries that aren't great options. His melee weapons, though, have a lot of potential. While stuff like the Disciplinary Action and Equalizer don't really work for entirely different reasons, I landed on 2 potential choices, the Market Gardener and the Escape Plan. The Market Gardener is obviously a key staple soldier weapon and a lot of people's favorite weapon in the game, and I could see a lot of dedicated Trolldier mains absolutely loving to get their hands on an Australian Market Gardener, whereas the Escape Plan is a more consistently useful utility and an overall more viable weapon. In the end, the Escape Plan won out for me. I'd say make the head and tape at the base of it gold, and make the handle a much darker shade of brown. That way you'd get the same color coordination as with something like the Australium Scattergun, but could also make funny epic haha gaming gold pickaxe Minecraft references with it. This may or may not have been the thing that helped me decide on this one, and while it's definitely a stupid childish meme, it's one that I can't pass up. I totally understand if you're more partial to the Market Gardener though. Either way, both of these weapons would make great Australiums. For Pyro, it wasn't even difficult. Not for a second. This is a weapon I'm genuinely surprised isn't available as an Australium already, considering what a powerful and key staple Pyro weapon it is, and how easy it would be to adapt into an Australium on Valve's part, the Flare Gun. The Flare Gun is already one of my favorite weapons visually in the game, as it has such a nice, shiny, plasticky, reflective texture to it that just looks really satisfying under the right lighting environment. This one would be ludicrously easy to adapt and stupidly easy to implement to the Australium mold. Just make the entire barrel golden and keep the black parts the same way. It's such a perfect, easy to implement concept that I'm surprised Valve never pulled the trigger on it. I know some people would also say the Scorch Shot or Detonator, but considering that those are both modeled after the Flare Gun at a base, I'd say the Flare Gun wins out. Those are definitely iconic staple pyro weapons, but the Flare Gun is so much more visually appealing to me and iconic at a base level. Also, it'd be great to give people less reasons to run the Scorch Shot. Overall, Australium Flare Gun for life. Demo Man is in absolutely no shortage of Australiums, as he's the only class in the game who has one available in every weapon slot. He is literally the only class who can have an entire loadout of Australiums. Because of this, any of Demo Man's weapons are equally up for the title, and in my case, I landed on the Iron Bomber. This is one of the purest definitions of a side grade in the game, and one that gives Demo Man something of his own minigun versus Tomislav debate. Despite being the most recently introduced weapon on this list, I genuinely think that it's such a key staple Demo Man weapon at this point that it's more than deserving of some kind of upgrade. The Scottish Resistance, Lock and Load, Quickie Bomb Launcher, they're all great, but I fail to see any of them as widely used or ubiquitous enough to really deserve the Australium moniker. Same goes for a lot of Demo Man's melee weapons. They have their dedicated fans, but aren't key parts of the game's identity. I know the Iron Bomber has got a bit of a negative stink around it for being brain dead or lacking skill, but if that was keeping anything from having Australiums, then I don't think Heavy would have any. All things considered, the Iron Bomber is the way to go. Speaking of Heavy, he's our final class with 2 primary Australiums, and also our final class who's even a remotely difficult choice. I know some people are screaming, Australium sandwich, over and over and over again watching this right now, but that's honestly not my first choice. I think making either the entire thing or just parts of it golden would look kind of weird, and while it'd be very funny and very in character considering Heavy can already eat expensive metal, it's not what I'm gonna go with. Instead, I'm gonna go with another key meta melee weapon, this time being the Fists of Steel. This is another one that just makes too much sense for Valve to ever fully implement. They're already made out of reflective metal, you just have to make them gold. Plus, giving Heavy any sort of Australium he can just wear as gloves would be very funny to me, kind of disrespecting and devaluing the whole Australium concept, and I live for that. And the concept of him using the Fist of Steel to block bullets with literal gold is incredibly badass and in character for Heavy. If any of these ever actually get into the game, they won't. I'd love for it to be this, the flare gun, and one other one we'll discuss later in the video at some point. Not biased, by the way, I use the Holiday Punch. Engineer is in a more complicated position, as all of his iconic staple weapons are either very intricately designed, which would make them difficult to adapt to Australiums, or just not iconic enough to be an Australium. That said, remember what I said about Heavy's hands, because I think an Australium gunslinger would be hilarious. There are so many ways you could go about doing this, between making the entire thing gold, just the hand, just the black parts, there's tons of different combinations. Plus, it's probably Engineer's most iconic and game-changing unlock, and wouldn't overlap too much of the Australium wrench due to both of them having entirely different playstyles. Lastly, it'd probably have some sort of effect on the prices of strange gunslingers, and anything to make them more affordable is totally fine by me. This is definitely the most out there choice in the entire video, but if there's anything I've learned about Engineer over the years, it's that thinking outside of the box is his kind of thing. I know it might be kind of obvious to say something like Australium Jag, Australium Rescue Ranger, Australium Wrangler, but the gunslinger scratches that perfect itch of being both iconic and relatively easy to adapt without interrupting the core design of the weapon, plus a golden hand for Engineer would give him a literal infinity gauntlet, and I think that's very cool. Medic is funny because both of his core iconic unlocks that most people run on his loadouts are not available as an Australium. The obvious choice would be the Crusader's crossbow due to how ubiquitous and commonly used it is on medic players. It's generally considered one of the best weapons in the game, but I'm a bit more hesitant to use it as its design is a bit too complex to make it readily adaptable to an Australium. Instead, I've decided to go with the Uber Saw. This is another one that I think would be super easy to adapt, and I think medic players would scoop up like it's nothing. You could make literally the entire thing except for the tube that the Uber charge gets absorbed into golden, which would give it a really cool glowing sheen kind of thing when the tube is filled all the way, and would generally look really neat on either the red team or the blue team. Plus, medic players love themselves some Australiums, and I think they're all really hurting by the fact that neither of his most iconic weapons aside from his stock medigun are available as cool golden skins. This one's a lot more simple than the others. It's just a ubiquitous iconic medic weapon that most medic mains run, and one that I'm surprised isn't available as an Australium yet. Sniper was tricky to pick for this video. A lot of his most iconic staple weapons are either secondaries that aren't terribly easy to adapt to Australiums, or primaries that would overlap pretty heavily with the Australium sniper rifle. I went through a lot of different choices for this, between the Girardi, which I said at the beginning wouldn't really work, the Machina, which I think would look ugly as sin if you made the entire thing golden, and there's not really specific outlined sections to color on this one, and several of his melee weapons, which I don't think anyone would get enough usage out of to really justify. Because of this, I landed on what might might be a controversial pick, and that's the Huntsman. Now, I know what you might be thinking. The Huntsman doesn't have enough surface area to make into an Australium that would be worth having, but I think there is room for experimentation here. You can make the entire arrow golden, or just the tip of it. You could make the entire bow golden, or just the parts that Sniper doesn't hold, or even maybe the part he does hold. And a part that I was actually pretty proud to come up with, which is to make the drawstring a sort of gilded, weighted string that also glows under the right lighting conditions. Not enough to immediately be visible, but enough to notice when you're walking under direct light or something like that. Again, I know this will probably be a controversial choice, and I know some people will be crying for stuff like the Girardi or Machina, but for me, none of them really scratch the itch of being both iconic and widely used enough on Sniper to get it that the Huntsman does. And lastly is the Spy. I know the immediate obvious choice would be the Revolver, but not only are we excluding stock weapons here, but also an Australium kunai would look really cool. And I know it's edgy and cringe and weeby and other internet words that don't exist, but come on man, a golden kunai would just be a really cool weapon to have on Spy that would really blend into so many loadouts super well. The kunai is already one of the most consistently popular and beloved Spy unlocks, being revered for being a high execution weapon that's really rewarding when used in the right circumstances, but punishing players who can't use it super harshly. And I think separating the men from the boys with an introduction of an Australium kunai would be a great way to help those top level Spy mains really flex their knowledge and experience with the class, or just blow a lot of money on and then die immediately. This is also the one I was referring to earlier when I said that if any Australiums were added, I'd want it to be this, the Fist of Steel, and the Flare Gun. An Australium kunai would be so cool, and I do not care if anyone makes fun of me for saying that. And that's the video. Thank you for indulging my insane fanfiction ramblings about an update that'll never come to a 16-year-old video game so that I can pretend to buy very expensive virtual items that I don't need. Hope you enjoyed, hope you have a fantastic day before, during, and after watching. If you disagree with any of these choices, let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you all later. Thanks, and cheers. A little over 4 years ago, I made a video about what I deemed at the time to be the creepiest items on the TF2 workshop. Items that took the Halloween theme of Scream Fortress to its logical extreme, and took the form of some truly grotesque items. Despite being crunchy as all hell, and my voice sounding even more goofy-esque than it does now, people really seem to enjoy that video, and since I made it, a lot more creepy cosmetics have been added to the TF2 workshop. So, in the spirit of TF2's biggest Scream Fortress update in years, I wanted to take a deep dive into the dregs of the TF2 workshop once again, and find the new creepiest items on offer. Items that are so daring that even Valve wouldn't touch them. The primary rule to note here is that I'm only counting unbanned items that are at the very least passable in quality, as it's neither fun, fair, nor interesting to just point and laugh at poorly modeled 10-year-old submissions. Also, quick warning, some of the items in this video are exceptionally rough by TF2 standards, so if you're averse to things like body horror, blood, and things like that, I'd suggest turning away. That said, let's roll. Scout has a good amount of creepy adjacent cosmetics on the workshop. Between the funny epic haha references and boundless hairstyles, you can find some really stomach-churning stuff on Scout's workshop. One item I was always enamored by was the Strikeout, which is a cosmetic that takes a brutal spin on an otherwise pretty funny concept. However, a few years later, some daring individuals would take it upon themselves to up the intensity of this idea and grace us with the Self-Sip. This one is just kind of gross in a deeply unpleasant way. The concept of having an exposed brain with visible blood and cranial fluid leaking from it is already rough, but the addition of a surreal auto-cannibalism edge is what really tips it onto this list. When I see this thing's preview images, I just end up thinking logistically about what's actually happening, and end up with both nausea and a headache at the same time. Like, my mind tries to fill the gaps for how something like this would feel, and it's just never good. This item ultimately just elicits a deeply uncomfortable response from me, but in a good way. Overall, I definitely drink to the Self-Sip. Soldier is in a good supply of creepy cosmetics. Could be due to his general insanity, his intimidating build, or his fearsomeness as an opponent in-game, but some people love turning the Soldier into all manner of monsters and creatures. But when I went down to the workshop on the weekend of September 18th, 2023, I was not prepared for what I was about to see. The face value. This is simply a level of brutality that does not work in TF2. What we've got here is a flayed human flesh mask with styles for either decayed or fresh skin, worn over the soldier's face with eye and mouth holes to make room for all sorts of crazed expressions. This item also comes with an entire appropriate Leatherface set, and yes, I'm aware that this is a Leatherface reference, but holy hell, is this a little much for TF2. Like, I know the game is rated M and has cartoony gore and stuff, but this item feels, no pun intended, like a cut above pretty much everything else that's currently in the game. When you pair this thing with its only workshop preview image, which appears to be Soldier mangling a restrained Pyro, you definitely get the vibe that the creators of this item have some interesting ideas about TF2. Regardless, it might be a bit much for me, but maybe you guys will like the cut of this item. Pyro has the most creepy cosmetics on the TF2 workshop. It's not even a contest. Something about their mysterious, insane, disturbing, and frightening persona just makes for good Halloween cosmetics. However, immediately after I made the original video, someone posted an item to the TF2 workshop that pretty effectively quashed my initial choice and took over the reins as the new creepiest Pyro cosmetic. That item is the old fish lips. Now, there's an entire trend on the TF2 workshop of turning the TF2 classes old, and while I don't think any of these items have ever actually been added to the game, people definitely keep making them. But when I look at the old fish lips, I don't see old Pyro or unmasked Pyro. I see Pyro wearing an old man's face as a flesh suit. This item is just deeply wrong, man. Between the eyes that follow the camera, the uncanny way the skin just juts out in place of Pyro's mask, the excessive detail with the wrinkles and stuff, the mask's filter coming out of its mouth, almost resembling a creepy gag sort of thing, it's just all around very uncomfortable. I respect the hustle of trying to turn a famously faceless merc into an old coup, but in this case, this item will need a few years to grow on me. Demo Man sadly doesn't have too many creepy cosmetics. The worst one, easily, I already covered in the original video, so for the sake of not repeating myself, I'm gonna go ahead and pivot a little bit and talk about a less creepy but more puzzling one for demo, the Tusked Tippler. Now, I'm aware of the workshop trend of turning the TF2 classes into animals, and I don't have the necessary degree in virginomics to care about whether or not they're pandering to furries or whatever, but what I am wondering is why they turned Demo Man into a photorealistic narwhal. I'm aware that unicorns, despite being fictitious, are Scotland's national animal, and narwhals are indeed the unicorns of the sea, but this seems like kind of a stretch to me. It kind of does earn some creepy points as well, as the narwhal's vacant, expressionless eyes directly contrast against the Demo Man's very expressive and animated human body, and it just all around looks a little weird. This is just one of the most confusing workshop submissions I've ever seen, but I honestly don't hate it. I like how silly it is, and it fits TF2's Halloween equals anything goes mentality. Overall, this item isn't worth a huge commotion. Heavy, not unlike Pyro, also had a rather infamous workshop item submitted just as I was working on the original video. And just like Pyro, it stomps the one from that original video quite handily, the Meathead. Ignoring the King Crimson reference in its workshop thumbnail, which is easily the scariest part about it, this item just elicits an instinctive wince from anyone who looks at it. Like, we've all had an open scraper cut and have felt that deep penetrating sting as something brushes up against it, and this item poises to put that sensation throughout Heavy's entire human body. It's also a very classic type of body horror, but one that isn't often depicted within TF2. This is one that I could definitely see being a big meme cosmetic if it were added. People paint it purple and pretend they were Thanos and stuff like that, so maybe it'd have to be a Halloween exclusive, but either way, it's still a properly disturbing cosmetic that I can't bear to look at in all of the right ways. It might not be the most terrifying, but this is definitely a cosmetic that truly makes my skin crawl. I'll be honest with you guys, Engineer has no creepy cosmetics, absolutely none. He's got a few vaguely unsettling cyborg and robot cosmetics, a few science-themed ones, and a few quirky references, but all in all, he's easily got the lowest supply of significantly creepy items on offer. Because of that, we'll have to wing it. In the original video, I went with a cartoony body horror sort of item, and you'll be happy to know that I'm doing the exact same thing here. This is the Toolshed Terror Slight Return. This item obviously isn't realistic by any stretch, but it's still wince-inducing, especially when you've seen the finer details. The amount of stray strewn about gore and loose skin flopping around in this item is really gnarly, and the overall level of detail is second to none for such a conceptually goofy cosmetic. Valve just added a similar item to this for Pyro, and I'd love to see Engineer get a chance at something like this. The description and concept for this item also invite the unpleasant idea that this really is just the result of an unfortunate accident on Engineer's part, which is just kind of sad. All in all, this item might split opinions, but I think it's quite fun. Medic has plenty of creepy cosmetics, from macabre references to straight up body horror to whatever the hell this is. He's in no short supply of candidates for this video. That said, I've elected to go with one of the most jarring, unbanned cosmetics I've ever seen on the workshop, the Uber Bite. This is a cosmetic that simply replaces Medic's head with a giant, hyper-realistic set of human teeth and gums, complete with flexes for voice lines and an all-around keen eye for detail. This one's just uncanny. Like, imagine trying to headshot a medic only to realize that his entire head is just a mouth, or imagine being on 1 HP and desperately needing a medic only to see this guy turn the corner. If he's got the burly beast, it'd be even worse. The lack of any other facial features also aids in the overall uncanny creepiness of this item, and it's one that I'm certain would have to be a Halloween exclusive if it was ever truly added to the game. This is definitely one cosmetic that I'd say bit off more than it could chew, but I definitely don't dislike it. Sniper is thankfully our last class without a healthy supply of creepy cosmetics. Most of the items on his workshop tend to be either funny epic haha references or just generally themed stuff. That said, remember that Dr. Lal spooktacular video with the Pennywise sniper? I asked that because Piddles the Clown is an item on the workshop. This one is pretty simple. Killer clowns are an inherently macabre and creepy concept, and turning the sniper into one is, in my opinion, a pretty genius idea. I love how this cosmetic hones in on the more jester-esque Harlequin type of clown makeup, really adds to the surreal freakiness of it. If there's any cosmetic from this video that I'd like to see added to the game, it'd probably be this, as creepy clowns are one of my favorite fiction tropes, and I'm sure that sniper mains are already used to being the dedicated clowns of their respective servers. This one might be a little more simple and a little less outwardly creepy than other cosmetics in this video, but it's such a good concept that's executed on so well that I had to include it. This cosmetic truly is no laughing matter. And lastly is the Spy. He's in no shortage of creepy cosmetics, with his general sneaky assassin nature and mysterious aura lending themselves very well to designing some true nightmare fuel. That said, the choice for this video was never in any doubt: the Fleshy Facade. When I first saw this cosmetic, I thought it was just another flesh mask, but then I took a closer look and realized that it was much, much worse and the exact opposite. This is a flayed spy head with his balaclava being replaced by removed skin and exposed muscle and tendons. A truly grotesque concept, and one that really pushes the body horror extent present within TF2's cosmetics. That said, I actually really like this cosmetic, and I think that it's a pretty genius concept, even if it is a bit stomach churning. It's really gross, but really fun in all the right ways, and the workshop image hinting that this was Medic's doing is really funny and in character. This cosmetic fills the same niche as something like the heavy cosmetic from earlier, yet is somehow even worse. This cosmetic's appeal is definitely more than skin deep.
Peekaboo!
And there we have it. Thank you for revisiting the dregs of the TF2 workshop with me. I'll have a workshop collection linked below with every cosmetic I talked about both in this video and the original video, so if you want to vote on any of them, you're more than welcome to. Also, if you're a workshop creator who thinks you can top any of the things I put in this video, then try your luck at it, and I might make a future video again in another 4 years. Thanks, hope you have a fantastic day before, during, and after watching. Happy Scream Fortress, and cheers. Hey all, this is a little bit of a filler video, as the next weapon subcategories episode needs a bit more time to cook, so in the meantime, I wanted to bring y'all a little ranking. It's a pretty commonly held belief in the TF2 community that each class's stock weapons tend to be among their best options, and that unlockable weapons tend to be optional side grades more times than not. Your mileage on this belief may vary, just look at things like the crossbow and the sandwich, but where it absolutely does not apply is each class's stock melee weapons. More times than not, a class's melee weapon tends to be their most disposable option, with each class having multiple alternatives that handily outperform their stock in terms of utility and overall usefulness. Based on this, I wanted to do a little experiment and see which class's stock melee weapon holds up the best. We're going to be ranking each class's stock melee and see if any of them can stand on their own amidst the game's myriad of other options. I obviously know that every stock melee functions identically save for scout and spies, so for this video, we'll be primarily ranking them based on how much each class makes use of them compared to their counterparts. That said, let's roll. I don't think this will be a controversial pick at all, but the worst stock melee weapon in the game is easily the Pyro's Fire Axe. This is an interesting case, as the Fire Axe is the only weapon in the game with an objective direct upgrade available in the exact same slot as it. Not in the sandwich Ubersaw sort of way where it's an ideological upgrade, but in a this weapon is identical with an additional upside kind of way. In this case, it's the third degree, a weapon that functions identically to the stock Fire Axe with an additional unique positive mechanic and no downsides. It is quite literally TF2's only pay-to-win weapon. Because of this, and Pyro's general mechanics as a class, there is quite literally no reason to ever be hitting enemies with your stock melee weapon as Pyro. With the third degree, just use that, and without it, just run over enemies with your flamethrower for more close-range damage over a smaller period of time. All in all, Pyro's Fire Axe is a clear choice for the bottom of the list, and a weapon that I don't think is ever a serious consideration. I'm sorry if that burns any of you Pyro mains out there. Next up is a weapon that's placement pains me a little bit, both due to how funny it is and because it's on my favorite class, but the second to bottom place has to be Heavy's Fists. Aside from Pyro, Heavy is easily the class who has the least reason to be hitting enemies with his stock melee weapon. Not only does he have options like the Fists of Steel and Fast Gloves, which provide on-equip bonuses and don't actively require you to hit enemies, but he also has weapons like the Holiday Punch and the Crit Gloves, which do provide positive on-hit bonuses. On top of that, Heavy is simultaneously the slowest class in the game, and the one who outputs the highest amount of close-range sustained damage out of any class on offer, so the situations where you'll be in punching range of enemies and not revved up are exceptionally few and far between. If you're not running around intending to punch people as Heavy, you really won't find yourself in situations to do it all that often. They're not made straight up obsolete like the Fire Axe, but the fists are definitely not punching up. I'm sorry, Heavy, this is one boxing match you simply can't win. For our final example of a class whose stock melee weapon is directly outclassed by a single option, we have Medic. Now, the Bone Saw does have one pretty notable upside, in that it's the highest DPS melee in Medic's entire arsenal that also doesn't compromise his health, but also the Uber Saw exists. This is a clear and unfortunate example of an unlockable option simply being the objective best in slot pick. While the Bone Saw might deal more damage over time, Medic is not a class who's intended to secure kills on his own, and the sheer utility of 1/4 of your Uber every swing is too strong to pass up. And if you're not fiercely married to the Uber Saw, then the Solemn Vow is also a powerful medic option that can be surprisingly useful. While the Bone Saw is arguably the most useful for a battle medic, the Uber Saw and even Solemn Vow offer more to you and your team in terms of your actual intended role as the medic. A few extra swings of damage every few seconds doesn't really matter in the face of guaranteed Uber charge after only 4 swings, or being able to scout recon on the enemy team that the other melee weapons offer. You really can't heal that wound, I'm sorry. Next up is the first class on the list whose placement is entirely due to the stiff competition in their melee slot, Scout. Now, I think Scout's stock bat is definitely an iconic weapon, and one that I can see the merits in as a pure damage tool to some extent, especially in people who can't consistently land all of their scattergun shots. But in general, Scout has an incredibly stacked lineup of melee weapons that's overall utility significantly outmatched the potential of the bat. Between the Rap Assassin and Boston Basher's bleed and Uber farming, the Candy Cane's healing, the Atomizer's mobility, and the others, Scout simply has too many powerful utilities available in his melee slot to make the purely damage-oriented stock bat ever worth equipping. I can see its merits as a damage dealer if you're a scout who frequently falls back on it to clean up low-health enemies, but once you've developed your aim a bit more and start consistently securing kills without ever needing to pull out your melee, that upside quickly crumbles. All in all, the bat isn't as bad as the previous 3 options, but it's also not hitting a home run either. It's time for a classic case of same shit, different toilet, because Soldier's in pretty much the exact same situation as Scout. The stock shovel isn't bad, and does have genuine utility as a close-range damage dealer in cases where the enemy closes the distance on you without a shotgun, but it's overall outshined by Soldier's incredibly stacked lineup of melees. The incredibly useful disciplinary action and escape plan are obviously difficult to pass up, but the real competition lies in the Market Gardener. While it does have a slower swing speed, its potential to guarantee instant kills with resourceful rocket jumps and smart positioning while also dealing uncompromised damage compared to the shovel is what really causes it to outdo the stock. There's just no reason to ever bring the stock shovel when Soldier's other options offer so much more. Again, with the less boisterous melee lineup, Soldier's shovel could be a real contender, especially on an explosive class who can't use his primary weapon at close range without risking self-damage, but as is, it really can't dig itself out of this mid-tier hole. Would you believe that over halfway through the list here, we're just now reaching the good stock melees? First up is the Engineer's Wrench. Now, the obvious elephants in the room here are the Southern Hospitality and the Jag, which are both separately considered direct upgrades to the stock wrench for different reasons, and while I know that that's not a glowing endorsement for the stock wrench, I think it does offer legitimate utility as an all-arounder without being completely outmatched by other options. Engineer's other wrenches are certainly strong, and you could argue that he's in the same situation as Scout or Soldier, but I find the uncompromised all-around usefulness of the stock wrench to shine a bit more brightly in maintaining and putting up Engineer's buildings than the bat or shovel do in simply dealing damage. Engineer has more to gain from an unimpeded generalist utility than most other classes do simply due to its base mechanics, and as a result, I find the stock wrench to be a safe if potentially niche option within his lineup. It's not the best, but it's far from bad or useless. And now for what might seem like a potential sleeper pick, the Sniper's Kukri. I know that having this so high up on the list might seem a bit crazy, but when you look at Sniper's melee lineup and see that 2 of his 4 options are the Tribalman Shiv and the Shaw, it'll start making a little bit more sense. Even the infamous Bushwalker relies on a combo with a secondary to reach its full potential, whereas the Kukri just kind of provides unfiltered raw melee damage to a class who probably needs it more than any of the others in the game. If you're ever playing Sniper without the Jarate, are not a quickscope god, you want to bring an SMG or a backpack, or you just all around want to deal good melee damage, then you'd be hard pressed to find a better option to fall back on than the Kukri. Sniper really does have a lot of use for uncompromised raw melee damage in a way that most other classes don't, and unlike Scout or Soldier, he doesn't really have a large number of best in slot options to outmatch his stock. This might seem like an innocuous weapon, but I promise it's Sniper's best standalone melee option for sending enemies 6 feet down under. Remember everything I said about the Engineer being able to benefit from an all-arounder melee weapon with no frills? Well, take everything I said there, but apply it to Killin this time instead. The stock knife is a criminally underrated tool within the Spy's lineup, and one that offers unparalleled safety and consistently to a class that desperately needs both. All of his best unlockable options, most notably the Kunai and Big Earner, feature substantial negatives that strong-arm the Spy into very specific weapon-based playstyles, whereas the stock knife is just kind of Spy in his purest form. No frills, no crippling downsides or overbearing positives, just good old sneakin', backstabbing, meat-slapping Spy. Considering that every other option features some kind of sweeping alteration to the class's game plan and base abilities, there's genuine appeal to just kind of playing Spy the way he was originally envisioned and intended. If you ever want to play the purest, least altered version of this class on offer, then the stock knife is the way to go. Or if you just want to be safe, which I also understand. And as our uncontested best stock melee, we've got the Demo Man and his iconic Scrumpy. The bottle is amazing not because of what it does, but because of what it doesn't do. Did you ever realize that literally every unlockable demo melee, aside from the Pain Train, is designed to be used with Demo Knight, or otherwise has significant penalties? They all have holster and deploy speed penalties, and are all transparently designed to be used with shields and boots. By comparison, the stock bottle is the option that complements pure stock Demo Man the most, and that's important because stock Demo Man might just be the best all-around pure stock class in the game. The sticky bomb launcher and grenade launcher are just that useful, and having access to an immediately accessible no-frills melee weapon to clean up over-encroaching enemies is indispensable to their overall playstyle. If you ever want to play Demo Man, just Demo Man, and not Demo Knight or Hybrid Knight, the bottle is the clear winner. It facilitates one of the strongest playstyles in the game to function at close range, and for that, it's also the winner of this video. And that was a little melee weapon tier list for you guys to enjoy while I work on my next big video. I realize this video might have had a hot take or two in it, and I apologize for that. If any competitive players want to chime in and tell me that the Bone Saw, or the Stock Fist, or the Stock Bat, or the Shovel are actually really good in DSL, Pooplander, Series 9, ESL, or whatever, then I promise you I won't listen, and I hope you all have a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch you all later. Cheers! I feel like some people can be a bit narrow-minded in terms of which TF2 weapons they prefer to use. Sure, the game hasn't gotten a major balance update in well over half a decade, and the community has more than effectively figured out what the most effective weapons for each class are, but in a game with over 150 unlockable weapons, you'd think that seeing someone run something fun or off-meta would be less of a surprise than it generally is. So in this video, I want to discuss some off-meta TF2 weapons that I personally really like. I literally make half of my income talking about this game's weapons, so I definitely have have some degree of experience using off-meta stuff. I want to stress, we're talking about off-meta weapons, not underrated, underused, or bad weapons. To call any of these weapons bad would be a gross miscalculation, and I like to think of them more as either semi-relevant novelties to straight up good if underused weapons, rather than terrible underrated gems that I have to put on a cape for. We're not going to be talking about the buffalo steak or the hot hand or the overdose in this video. You'll see what I mean. Regardless, let's dive in. Starting with Scout, we have one of my recent newfound favorites in the Force of Nature. Now, the Force of Nature obviously isn't bad or hated, and I do know people who've identified as dedicated Force of Nature mains, but in general, this is not a weapon you see in casual too often. I think part of it has to do with the sheer reliability of stock, and especially the soda popper, and also because this thing mandates some real playstyle adjustments for a Scout. Firing it while in midair completely halts any aerial momentum you had, and its damage can often feel as though it's just shy of securing the kill on important enemies. However, after recording footage of this item for my knockback weapons video, I found it to be an immediately enjoyable weapon and one that I was eager to dive back in and use more of. I even went out of my way to buy an Australian one, that's how much I like it. There's just something so satisfying about blindsiding enemies with knockback stronger than an air blast, while also chunking their HP, and nothing matches the sheer visceral mind candy that is double tapping someone for an instant kill. Plus, while I very controversially did not fully understand the extent of it at the time of making my knockback video, this thing has some insane hidden movement tech beyond its simple third jump, and it really is a weapon that rewards experimentation in spades. I said that I liked it in that video, but apparently I didn't like it enough or in the right ways, so I'm correcting that now. The Force of Nature is very fun. Soldier and Pyro are in an interesting position for this video, as they're both classes I don't generally stray too far from the established meta for. I considered putting either the Conqueror or the Panic Attack in their respective slots, but something in my brain kept me from doing that, and instead I decided to consolidate them into what I believe is a very underrated multi-class weapon, the Reserve Shooter. The Reserve Shooter is such a neat underrated gun, having the same stats but serving an entirely different function on each class. On Soldier, it's a potent combo tool that pairs exceptionally well with something like the Liberty Launcher, or just the ability to pop up enemies, being able to pop enemies up and quickly tap them with a shot from this gun for the kill. On Pyro, it's a surprisingly effective alternative to the Panic Attack, having increased, if slightly worse switch speed, and otherwise identical damage and spread to stock. I realized that when this weapon could mini-crit after an air blast, it was one of the most hated weapons in the game, but in its current state, I honestly think it's a really solid no-frills option that rests comfortably alongside the shotgun and Panic Attack. Also, it has a cool firing sound. Demoman is another class where my weapons of choice are usually pretty bog standard. I generally run pure stock Demoman with the Iron Bomber in place of the grenade launcher, and because of this, we'll have to turn towards Demo Knight for this video's pick. For this subclass, I find the Half Zatoichi to be my preferred melee. I realize in full that the Eyelander is typically the most preferred Demo Knight weapon, but the fact that the Half Zatoichi functionally has no downsides on the subclass cannot go understated. Whereas the Eyelander requires getting a few kills to really hit its stride and loses that momentum in the face of a single hard counter and death, the Half Zatoichi provides only positives and consistent rewards for kills. Comboed with the Tide Turner, you can effectively ping-pong between enemies, rapidly refilling both your health and charge meter with each one. You can survive some absolutely wacky shit with this thing, and go on rolls and kill streaks that simply shouldn't be possible for a melee-oriented subclass in a shooter game. That was a paraphrased quote from my self-healing weapons video, which I included because it really does get the point across. Regardless, whereas the Half Zatoichi isn't exactly the most underrated weapon, I'm genuinely surprised that it's not more often considered as a serious contender for Demo Knight specifically. Once again, it functionally has no downsides. Keep that in mind. Heavy is my main, and I've not made it a secret on this channel that I tend to scrutinize weapons for him harder than any other class. A bad heavy weapon is extra bad for me because I have hundreds of hours playing the class and a more experienced perspective on him. That said, we are too mean to the Huolong Heater, and I've never understood why. This is a weapon that I've always been higher on than others, but I didn't realize the full visceral potential of until recently. Simply put, this thing does a lot of fucking damage, and unlike the Brass Beast, doesn't sacrifice too much to do it. I know a lot of people really hate the rapid ammo consumption, but if you play intelligently and make sure to only jump rev for important encounters while also scooping up dropped ammo boxes, it's easily mitigated. Otherwise, this thing's close range damage between the Ring of Fire, base damage, and boosted damage against burning players is absolutely tremendous and can legitimately shred enemies in milliseconds. This thing comfortably outpaces the damage of all of Heavy's other primaries when the chips stack in its favor. On top of this, it's extremely powerful for both shutting down choke points and especially as a dedicated cart heavy weapon where it virtually has no downsides. It's also really fun to drop on top of enemies using this thing and ignite them all at once only to shred them in a matter of moments. This is no joke, probably my third favorite minigun for Heavy, and one that I would strongly recommend giving an earnest try. If you can adapt to its playstyle, there is nothing else like it in the game. Engineer famously has very few weapons, and the ones that he does have are all extensively well documented in terms of their quality and usefulness. That said, I'm surprised that more people don't use the short circuit. I realize why. It's because the pistol and Wrangler are both incredibly splashable into any loadout, whereas the short circuit is more specialized, but in situations where it shines, it really shines. With a reliable, constantly refilling metal supply like a cart or dispenser, this thing becomes an uncontested king at providing coverage to your team from projectiles and spam, and its usability as a pure combat tool is a bit underrated in my opinion. There's nothing like standing on a cart and just chucking out energy ball after energy ball, ruining the enemy soldiers and demos days as they doggedly try and figure out why their 8,000 hours of comp experience aren't helping against this tiny little Texan man and his arm plug. Plus, it's unironically really great at cleaning up low health enemies in an incredibly easy and non-committal way. So while I do understand why the short circuit is certainly Engineer's most niche secondary, it's also one that I feel is totally effective in that niche and worth using more often than people consider. For Medic, we're going to be violating the rules of this list a little bit and talking about a combination of two weapons. We're doing this primarily because these two weapons work really well in tandem to bring out the best in each other like a good sitcom couple. The Blutsauger and the Solemn Vow. Now, both of these weapons can be totally effective on their own, if inarguably outclassed by the Holy Duo, but when you combine them together is when their real potential comes out. The Blutsauger is obviously a much more aggressive, combat-oriented syringe gun, and the Solemn Vow allows you to passively see enemy health, so what these weapons do together is enable a much more active and aggressive medic playstyle. If you're healing someone or in between heal targets and notice a fleeing or over-encroaching enemy on death's door, then you have exactly the tools you need to clean them up at very little risk to yourself. On top of that, it enables you to gauge risks and decide whether or not to fight or fly after your heal target dies super effectively. This loadout allows medic to dynamically assess risks and pick his battles as they come, and it's honestly reinvigorated my interest in playing the class in general. It's far from meta, but it's also far from bad or even gimmicky. If you're burnt out on the old crossbow Ubersaw combo and don't mind a little bit of a shakeup, try this loadout out. It's Battle Medic Light, and I like that. Sniper as a class, I've openly referred to being bad at in previous videos, and if you've seen my beginner strap weapons video, which statistically speaking most of the people watching this probably have, then you probably already know where I'm going with this. I'm a filthy Sydney Sleeper apologist. This is a weapon I'm deeply conflicted on, as on one hand, it's incredibly fun and BM in a way that doesn't feel cheap or unfair, yet on the other hand, I know whenever I'm using it that I'd be helping my team more if I were just using another rifle and getting headshots. That said, sometimes you just want to pee on people, and the Sydney Sleeper enables you to do that at a very safe and consistent rate. I absolutely love one-shotting light classes and medics with this thing, and applying a potent 35% extra damage debuff to any tankier enemy from any range is an incredibly powerful sleeper stat in my opinion. While it is true that just headshotting them with another rifle would be inarguably more effective, I'm bad and can't always do that, and concern it, sometimes I just want to hit people with the P-gun. I like the stupid fucking piss rifle, okay? Regardless, while I know it's far from meta and probably among Sniper's worst primaries, I can't deny that the Sydney Sleeper is close to being my number one. And lastly is Spy, and just like Sniper, my choice for him is a weapon that I've negatively referred to in previous videos, the Your Eternal Reward. I actually talked about this one in what's currently my most viewed non-short TF2 video, and if you've seen it, you'll remember that I was pretty mean to this weapon on a practicality level. You'll also remember that I mentioned repeatedly how fucking cool it is. This weapon absolutely rocks when it works. While it's objectively pretty bad and just overcomplicates Spy's basic job, the amount of bonkers stuff you're able to get away with using this thing is is absolutely ludicrous. Being a legitimate body snatcher and seamlessly taking the place of enemies is unrivaled in terms of the level of dopamine hits you experience as Spy, and the fact that enemies simply don't seem to react more often than not when you use this weapon really makes you feel like a true big brain assassin rather than the weakest class in the game. This feels like how Spy was intended to be played, a hard to pin down, infiltration-oriented snake, rather than whatever the TF2 community have turned him into. Basically, this thing feels like Spy fully realized as a gameplay concept, and despite its numerous issues and general lack of goodness, I still really like using it every now and then. And there we have it, some non-meta TF2 weapons that I personally enjoy. Again, I realize that some of these weapons are pretty popular and aren't exactly the most non-meta choices, but I hope you enjoyed regardless. This is just intended to be a little filler video as I work on my next major project, so I hope you enjoyed, hope you have a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch you all later. Cheers! I've been watching a lot of videos recently by the YouTubers Big Yellow and Reverend, who are both creators who specialize at least partially in discussing the finer nuances of competitive Pokemon. I really like both of their content, and a big focus of their channels is the concept of niches. Anytime a developer designs something for a multiplayer video game, it's most likely intended from the outset to have a specific niche or role that it fills. For some TF2 examples, the Panic Attack is obviously intended to be a last resort combo sort of weapon, and the Direct Hit is obviously intended to be a high risk, high reward damage dealer. However, it's really easy to just state the obvious intended use cases of weapons in this game, and I've done that a lot myself, so after being inspired by Big Yellow and Reverend, I want to talk about some TF2 weapons with finer use cases that the community at large might not discuss too much, or might not be immediately obvious to people without the specific wiring that the truly brain-rotted among us might come up with. I want to note that the examples in this video will range from pretty common knowledge to total ideological nonsense, but I also know that everything I say in this video will probably be at least one person's first time hearing it, so if it's not yours, just be glad that it is for someone. So without further ado, let's discuss some TF2 weapons with the weird, silly little niches. So starting off with like baby's first TF2 fun fact, the unarmed combat, Holy Mackerel, and to a lesser extent Hot Hand are in essence direct upgrades from the stock melee weapons that they're intended to replace. Okay, maybe not the Hot Hand, but the first two specifically are intended to be reskins that deal the same amount of damage across the same amount of time as stock. But what some players might not realize, yet a lot inarguably do, is that they actually expose dead ringer spies due to their unique mechanics. Getting a hit with any of these weapons displays each individual attack in the kill feed, whereas getting a kill additionally displays a special unique kill notification. Upon killing a dead ringer spy though, the special kill notification will not be displayed, meaning that the player can always tell whether or not the spy they just killed is actually dead based on what the kill feed says. This is obviously very common knowledge though, like every TF2 YouTuber has talked about this at some point, and I even made fun of this fun fact in my Throw Meme Weapons video. It's pretty much TF2 Did You Know Gaming 101, so for the rest of this video, I want to discuss some wackier stuff. For instance, while we're still talking about the Dead Ringer, this weapon actually used to allow players to instantly complete spy contracts. Yeah, the weapon that feels like it's mechanically held together by clothespins and chewing gum surprisingly had some very funny interactions with some of the game's more archaic mechanics. Specifically, during the Tough Break update, rather than using the contractor, Valve issued contracts randomly to players based on specific weapons and playstyles. One of the spy contracts featured an advanced objective to absorb 125 points of damage with the then still very overpowered Dead Ringer. However, due to a funny oversight, the game did not correct itself to account for environmental damage, and thus it was incredibly easy to instantly complete the spy contract by pulling out your Dead Ringer and instantly game-ending yourself.
Nice work, Spy.
Any map hazard that killed you would do, so saw blades, walking off cliffs, and anything else could instantly complete the Dead Ringer contract. There's a lot of edgy tone-deaf self-harm jokes I could make here, but instead of doing that, let's just talk about something much funnier that also has to do with the Dead Ringer. P. Did you ever realize that the Sydney Sleeper is like the best Dead Ringer counter in the game? No, seriously, upon shooting a Dead Ringer spy with this weapon, not only is his Feign instantly popped, but the actual spy is immediately soaked in the sniper's glorious yellow nectar, effectively consuming his Dead Ringer use while also leaving him completely exposed. This might unironically be the best thing about the Sydney Sleeper, and unironically allow Sniper to pose a significant threat to what's otherwise a weapon that allows Spy to comfortably slink past him. I think it might also apply to the Sharpened Volcano Fragment, as it also deals damage damage while instantly applying a visual debuff, but I don't want to use the volcano fragment to test it out. I'll let you make that video. But yeah, I'm already a Sydney Sleeper apologist, so having an inarguable, very applicable use case like this, even if it is a somewhat niche one, is very cool. While we're still on the topic of sniper primaries, and finally moving on from Dead Ringer shenanigans, did you know that the Hitman's Heatmaker actually has a hidden upside that's always in plain sight? Snipers' primaries tend to be some of the most conspicuous weapons in the game in terms of audio feedback, and the Hitman's Heatmaker actually does live up to its design by having a mostly silenced and suppressed firing sound. If you're someone who likes to play sniper from unexpected or cheeky positions, this can be a surprisingly helpful tool against disorganized teams, so pretty much any casual team. They won't be able to hear you firing from across the map if you happen to miss, and won't be immediately cued into the presence of a sneaky sniper on the enemy team. Also, you can activate the focus meter from any level of charge. This should be obvious as it's one of the weapon's main mechanics, but you'd be surprised how many people don't seem to realize it. Talking about another primary weapon with a hidden upside, the lock and load has a little bit of a weird mechanic that might not be immediately obvious to someone who's not intimately familiar with TF2's stat vocabulary. The 25% faster projectile speed actually serves a double purpose, as it causes this weapon to have significantly more range than Demoman's other grenade launchers. These pills fly fast and far, like my morning medication traveling through my system by about noon. This is due to a variety of source engine fuckery and hidden grenades do not tumble stats working in tandem, basically meaning that this weapon's pills experience lower air drag and travel in a cleaner, straighter arc. This allows you to hit enemies and especially sentries from places where you really should not be able to, and all around makes engineers very angry. If I had a nickel for every time Valve gooped up the travel and tumble of one of Demoman's primaries, I'd have 3 nickels, which obviously makes 15 cents. And hey, we can't talk about TF2 weapons with funny hidden niches without talking about the original. The original is funny because this thing's entire existence is basically defined by being a reskin only in name, with its incredibly wide variety of small changes from stock, making it the poster weapon for cock measuring contests between elitist competitive soldier players. Its rockets travel from the center of the player's view, making it better for pogoing and peeking enemies, and all around functions entirely different from stock despite the game's posturing that they share identical stats and mechanics. Personally, I prefer the original to stock on a game feel level, and I feel like it would be the immediate choice for most players if a strange one didn't cost the same price as a new Nintendo Switch. But hey, I don't have to worry about that. Thanks, Carpet. Also, you will have to deal with the
Hand of Midas
over here every now and again, but that's unfortunately just something with the original. On to the more difficult to demonstrate section of this video, we've got 2 very similar cases. Did you know that the quick fix can actually get kills through a wide assortment of Jungle Inferno bugs working in unison, which can pretty much go for everything that was introduced in Jungle Inferno? Healing a thermal thruster pyro with the quick fix and blast jumping with them allows the medic to copy the thermal thruster's man-tread stomping ability, making it the only medigun with a fucking body count. Unfortunately, the number of circumstances you need to line up to actually make this happen in a match is almost Rube Goldberg-esque, but if you can manage to do it in an actual game, please send me a clip and I promise I will send you a funny emoji in return. And along similar lines, demand treads can not only deal the highest damage in TF2, but also possibly the highest damage out of any weapon in any multiplayer game ever. This is all very well documented in a great video by Squimjam of After Breakfast fame, but through stacking 98 man-tread soldiers on top of a heavy and throwing on some funny manpower buffs and we're Goomba stomping the top one, you can achieve damage so high that the game itself stops counting and just says infinite. This pair of worn boots can literally make a damage number so big that the computer gets tired of counting, and that's like the main thing that computers were made to do. We've officially worked through all of my non-heavy sections for this video, so consider this last stretch to be the heavy main-splaining portion. Surprisingly, the class I have the most experience with is the one that I know the most funny little quirks about. For starters, the Warrior Spirit is actually the highest per hit damage dealing melee weapon in the game. I feel like a lot of people either forget or willfully ignore this, primarily due to the Warrior Spirit's lack of goodness and the Skull Cutter existing, but yeah, the Warrior Spirit actually does 85 damage per hit, or over 250 with a crit. This actually doesn't make too big of a difference compared to the Skull Cutter in an actual application sense, as they both generally exist within the same damage thresholds due to the incredibly close numbers between their damage output, but at the very least, the Warrior Spirit can two-shot a Demo Knight with at most 1 head, so that's pretty cool. That's something only it can say. And while we're talking about heavy damage numbers, I feel like a lot of people credit the Brass Beast as the highest sustained damage dealing weapon in the game, but as I discussed in my ranking every heavy minigun video, this actually isn't true in application. Due to a combination of its flat damage boost against burning players, its Ring of Fire's flat damage, and the afterburn of the Ring of Fire, the Whole Long Heater is actually capable of outputting slightly more damage at point blank range than the Brass Beast. Also, fun fact, Ring of Fire actually deals even more afterburn damage while the Whole Long Heater is the active weapon, which I think is an entirely
entirely unique mechanic amongst all of TF2's weapons. I think the only weapons that might outpace the Holong are the Backburner and Flog with crits, but I'm terrified of actually looking into that and talking about flame particles on this channel, because trying to read how they work is like trying to dissect a fucking mathematical equation. And lastly, the Natasha and Brass Beast both have funny little quirks of allowing the Heavy to outlast some very important damage thresholds. The damage resistance below half health stat doesn't exactly work how you would expect it to, and actually soften the damage of any attack that would bring Heavy below 50% health at a base, allowing him to survive both an additional sniper quickscope and even a third demo pipe. And there isn't really anything funnier than seeing a demo player visibly double take when the Heavy survives their requisite 3-pill barrage. Anything that does exactly 300 damage takes at least one extra hit with the Natasha or Brass Beast, which sends people who play mainly competitive classes into a panicked frenzy when it happens to them. It's very funny. Also, as a little bonus, because I don't know where else I'll get to mention this, but the Holiday Punch has a very silly little mechanical oversight with its strange version specifically, where it'll still count stuns on enemies who are already laughing or even in another taunt so long as you're either hitting their back or critting. This actually allows a strange Holiday Punch to level up extremely quickly so long as you're willing to waste a valuable Holiday Punch stun poking someone's back. And as the self-proclaimed #1 Holiday Punch supporter Heavy main on YouTube, I grant you my blessing to do this. Also, something ubercharged stunning. So there's some TF2 weapons with silly little niches. This doesn't at all cover the entire base of TF2 weapons with small niche applications, so if you've got any other ones in mind, please share them and I might make a follow-up to this video. Or if you found this video to be an incredible waste of your time, at least you've got a good head on your shoulders. Thanks, hope you all have a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch you all later. Cheers! So y'all really seem to like that video I made about TF2 weapons with weird little niches. It didn't light the world on fire in terms of views or numerical reception, but in terms of comments and feedback, it's been one of my best performing TF2 videos ever. So I figured I'd give the people what they want and make a follow-up. These are even more TF2 weapons with weird niches. Weapons that feature small, oftentimes completely conceptual, specific use cases that might not be completely obvious to people without the specific breed of brain rot that longtime TF2 fans have. I want to stress that I tested and recorded every one of these in actual TF2 matches against actual human players, because if I couldn't put them to practice in casual, then what would be the point in peddling them to you? That said, let's roll. So starting out with an immediate follow-up to something from the first video, we're going to be talking about the Natasha and Brass Beast's damage resistance again. In the previous video, I discussed how it allows heavies to survive very important damage thresholds like demo pipes and sniper quickscopes. However, what I was not aware of was that in man vs. machine specifically, it also allows heavy with full blast resistance to survive even a Sentry Buster's explosion. I could genuinely see this coming in handy in an MBM match due to how popular the Brass Beast is and due to how much it restricts your movement. So if you're ever rocking full blast res and can't get away from a Sentry Buster, just rev up and face tank it and move along. I try to avoid talking about MBM in these kinds of videos specifically due to how different it is as a metagame, but in this case, I guess you could say I just couldn't resist. Next up is another follow-up from the previous video, this time talking about the Equalizer. I mentioned previously how the Warrior Spirit deals the highest per hit melee damage in the game, and many people were quick to point out that in practice, the Equalizer actually eclipses it when the soldier has low enough health and deals the true highest amount of per hit damage in the game. It deals slightly more damage than the soldier is at or below 52 health, and a whopping 107 per hit at exactly 1 HP. In practice, actually hitting someone with the Equalizer while at 1 HP is exceptionally rare and unlikely to happen in an actual match, but if you're the kind of person who fancies some risk versus reward playstyles, this is basically the king of them in TF2. Also, some people mention the half Zatoichi against fellow users of the weapon, and Spy's backstabs dealing more damage as well, but I don't tend to count those as they're more dedicated instant kill mechanics rather than concrete damage numbers. In this house, we obey the laws of damage numbers. Back to heavy for a bit, I want to talk about a funny little item synergy that may go unnoticed to the average player. We all know that the fast gloves reduce heavy's maximum health as he has them pulled out, which significantly reduces their usefulness as a rollout tool. That said, if you combo them specifically with the Dolichos bar, then you can actually pretty comfortably offset this. Eating the Dolichos bar while your max health is drained by the fast gloves will actually cause some kind of incredibly fucky interaction where they'll massively rebuff your drained max health, oftentimes getting you back to around 300 in in a single use. This is actually really fucking useful in a casual environment and allows you to get back in the fight after using the fast gloves much sooner. I do not possess the TF2 YouTuber technical know-how to tell you what's actually happening here on a code level, but I'd imagine it has something to do with both weapons directly interacting with Heavy's max health value. Either way, it's really cool and surprisingly helpful. It's like the best way to get use out of the Dolichos bar, unironically. So, you know the Diamondback, right? That incredibly infamous spy revolver that gives him the ability to fire off 102 damage critical harpoons from across the map at anyone he sees fit. Well, what if I told you that this weapon had a very specific bug that made it even more stupid? Let's say you start the round with any other spy revolver equipped. You step outside of spawn and switch to the Diamondback, but don't touch the resupply cabinet to actually equip it. Next, let's say you run outside and get a backstab or two. Finally, let's say you run all the way back to spawn and touch the resupply cabinet. Well, by golly, you've got a free Diamondback crit. Yeah, by using the resupply cabinet to switch to the Diamondback after securing a stab with another revolver equip, you can actually store potential Diamondback crits. This is a bit niche as it requires very specific setup at the beginning of each life and requires running all the way back to spawn, but if you're playing on a map where the fight is close to your spawn and you remember to do the setup each time, then all this really requires is playing spy normally with the revolver of your choice, switching to the Diamondback after, and then touching a resupply cabinet. So the Diamondback keeps eating. The TF streets are unfair. And hey, while we're talking about spy weapons of dubious balance, the red tape recorder exists. This thing is often considered one of the worst weapons in TF2, only ever equipped as a part of a funny meme loadout that requires you to stand around and do nothing.
I'm sorry, engineer, we have a job to do. Observers observe, they don't get involved.
That said, this thing does have one concrete positive over the stock sapper, and instead upon sapping a level 1 dispenser or reducing a dispenser to level 1, it'll actually instantly remove all of the stored metal from that dispenser. This is incredibly BM and really only exists to make engineer players very upset, but it can genuinely help delay his rebuilding process and keep him from face tanking his buildings of the nearby dispenser. So it actually can come in pretty clutch in the throes of an impactful push. Good job, red tape recorder, you're winner today. Next up, I want to talk about the Claymore. This weapon is primarily known for being the goon material for dedicated shrimping enthusiast Demo Knight mains, but it does have a bit of a hidden upside aside from that. The Claymore's longer charge duration serves a double purpose, as it actually extends the effective duration to land a guaranteed crit with a charge on one of Demo Man's shields. The game doesn't adjust the active window for a guaranteed crit during a charge with the Claymore, and instead just adds the extra charge time into that window, meaning that you get a slightly longer opportunity to score a guaranteed crit at the apex of a charge using this weapon. This is pretty cool, and gives the weapon's longer charge an even more applicable use case beyond enabling funny Demo Knight montages. It's very neat. Next up is one that I was unable to demonstrate in an actual match due to it relying on the hubris of enemies, but I can confirm that it works. Fun fact, the Fists of Steel allows Heavy to survive most of the game's taunt kills. The vast majority of taunt kills in TF2 are resolved internally as bullet or projectile damage and deal exactly 500 or less points of damage, meaning that a Heavy with the Fists of Steel out and maybe a slight bit of overheal can weather an enemy's Hail Mary achievement farming taunt kill with health to spare. I don't see this actually happening too often in an actual match, but if you're ever on like 2 Fort or something and want to scare the hell out of some hapless free-to-play, stand around with your Fists of Steel out and see who takes the bait. Send me a clip if it does happen to you. Now, if you'll let me, I want to correct a very controversial mistake from some of my previous videos. I've talked a few times about the Force of Nature's knockback enabling some very silly third jump movement tech, but I actually wasn't aware at the time that this isn't how you're supposed to use it. No, the true best way to use the fan is to look down at precisely a 45-degree angle, viewable with this console command, and jump and shoot at the same time. This grants Scout significantly more height and distance than can be achieved with even a double jump into a Force of Nature jump, and while I don't consistently see myself doing it without coords on screen due to the extremely strict angle required, I at the very least owed it to Force of Nature fans to make up for my mistake and mention it. So now you guys can rest easy knowing that I know how to use the Force of Nature. Now leave me alone. And while we're still on Scout weapons, did you know that Scout can be a shark? Yes, not unlike Pyro, Scout 2 can be an underwater man-eater, specifically with the Atomizer. This weapon features a funny mechanic to always mini-crit when the player is airborne, and due to what I can only assume is an oversight, will also always mini-crit when the player is underwater without their feet touching the bottom. This is actually pretty difficult to perform in practice, as there aren't a lot of TF2 maps that feature water deep enough to both completely submerge yourself while also not having your feet touch the ground, but on like Well or Lakeside, you can take up the mantle of the Great Bostonian Megalodon. Also have some funny jousting matches with Pyro Sharks. This is like a totally pointless little stat they added to begin with, so the fact that it doesn't work properly is very funny to me. As our second to last weird little niche for this video, the direct hit. I feel like most people recognize the direct hit as the premier one-shotting weapon in the game, being capable of just leading light classes at close range. However, did you know that with a crit, this weapon can actually one-shot heavies as well, with some change too, which allows it to even one-shot through the Brass Beast and Natasha's damage resistance. This is, as far as I know, the only non-sniper, spy, or 8 sticky trap attack in the game that does enough damage to do this, and is all around very funny on the rare occasion that it happens. Heavy can get deleted in the same way as any given light class. Not so giant after all, are you, big man? And because we closed out our previous video with a funny strange farming method, let's do that again. Soldiers' banners have a funny oversight where they gain points and level up in matches against non-human players, including both bot training and even man versus machine. This allows you to easily farm these items by just playing against easy mode bots or really hard locking soldier and MBM, and I think they're the only weapons in the game capable of doing this. So if you don't remember anything else I said in this video, make it this. The strange counter on anyone's banners is completely pointless and means nothing. So just like pretty much any other strange counter on any other weapon. And there we have it, some more TF2 weapons with funny, weird little niches. I'm always down to make more videos like this, so if any other ideas pop into your head for something like this, let me know. I actually did use a lot of suggestions from the previous video's comments for this one, so let your voice be heard. Either way and regardless, thanks, hope you have a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch you all later. Cheers! I feel like weapon combos and synergies are kind of an overlooked part of Team Fortress 2's game design. Sure, you can't go far in the average TF2 conversation without seeing someone mention Combo Pyro or Jarate Bushwalk a Sniper, but I genuinely feel as though it's understated just how many item combos exist in TF2. In fact, I'm pretty confident I can find at least one usable and fun one for each class. So in this little fun filler video, I want to discuss my favorite weapon synergies in TF2. One combination of at least 2 or more items for every class that I feel the community generally overlooks. I want to stress that these will vary vastly in how underrated or overlooked they are. Some of them are naturally more obvious and well-known than others, especially on classes with less weapons. But if you take anything away from this video, please let it be known that all of these are very fun to put into practice. All that said, let's roll.
You morons are about to catch a real beating.
Starting us off is a very fun and novel item synergy for Scout, being the Shortstop and Criticola. Now, the Shortstop is already obviously designed at a base to be a more mid-range oriented Scout primary that excels at engagements beyond the Scout's usual point-blank positioning, and the Criticola really takes this function and just straps rockets to it. The Shortstop is designed to be used at medium to long range, so granting it guaranteed mini-crits which mitigate damage fall-off allows it to hammer enemies with rapid-fire mid-range shots that deal surprisingly hefty damage. Nobody really expects to take 60 to 90 damage from a Scout across the map. Plus, the fact that you'll likely be engaging enemies from beyond close range means that the Criticola's usual downside of making the user also take guaranteed mini-crits is somewhat mitigated, as you'll likely be physically farther away from the enemy and more readily able to react to their attacks. I have trouble using the Shortstop without the Criticola these days, as I feel like these two weapons really do effectively bring out the best in each other. Just like a Gatorade-riddled pro baseball player, sometimes all you need is a good performance-enhancing sports drink.
Move, move, move!
Soldier, as a class, is no stranger to item combos between the iconic Market Gardener Rocket Jumper and Airstrike Base Jumper synergies, but I'm gonna be a big smelly contrarian and talk about a combo I like that I've never really seen anyone else use in this video: the Liberty Launcher and the Gunboats. Now, the Liberty Launcher is a weapon I've come around on a lot since talking about it in other videos on this channel, and while I don't think it's objectively very good, I do think it's just kind of fun and neat to bust out every now and then. Part of the reason for this is just how active and mobile you can be with this weapon, as the passive 25% self-damage res combined with its other stats really facilitate an unmatched flanking soldier playstyle. That said, when you combine it with the Gunboat's 60% self-damage res, then you end up only taking 15% of the ordinary damage you otherwise would with a rocket jump, and can just kind of become the most mobile thing on the map when all said and done. A big part of the Liberty Launcher's appeal is being able to freely rocket jump around and hammer enemies with attacks in places they don't expect, and the Gunboats combo, while definitely excessive and arguably very gratuitous in this regard, really accentuates this playstyle. If you've never tried it before, I'd say give it a go. You can just kind of appear wherever the hell you want. Next up is an item synergy I hate fighting on every level, yet cannot deny the effectiveness and usefulness of: the Phlogistinator and the Scorch Shot. Now, I despise both of these weapons, as the Phlog is a brain-dead new player trap that strips away Pyro's most important class-defining ability, and the Scorch Shot is a jack-of-all-trades that does a bit too much for just a bit too little, but it'd be stupid of me to pretend that they don't go together like peanut butter and chocolate. The Phlog operates in distinct phases, with the player needing to dynamically shift between careful attacks of opportunity and aggressive rolls while they build and use the meter respectively. The Scorch Shot greatly simplifies this, allowing the player to safely and consistently build their meter by taking long-range pot shots at groups of enemies and letting its insultingly generous afterburn, area of effect, and fire damage build the meter entirely risk-free. All it really takes to completely fill the Flog's meter is 2 or 3 well-placed Scorch Shot rounds, and if you manage to land a guaranteed mini crit at any point along the way, it'll probably take even less. The Scorch Shot really does remove the small amount of required thought and positioning that goes into using the Flog, and for that, it's earned itself both a spot on this list and a spot in hell.
Oh, too bloody easy.
Fourth up is an item synergy I've talked about at least twice on this channel before, and you'll be happy to hear that I'm talking about it again. Demo Man's Tide Turner and Half Zatoichi combo. Full disclosure, this is my preferred item set to use when playing dedicated Demo Night, or I guess Demo Rye. This is the ultimate renewable resource Demo Man loadout. With each kill, you're not only refilling your health by half, but you're also instantly refilling your charge meter, effectively allowing you to continually dart between enemies, securing kill after kill without running out of the resources you need to do it. The only two numbers a pure Demo Knight has to worry about managing are his health and charge meter, and with this combo, you'll never run out of either. As long as you can secure kills, you'll be continually topped off. The Half Zatoichi functionally has no downsides on pure Demo Knight, so if you ever find yourself one swing away from a kill and getting low on health, just keep on swinging. If you land the kill, you'll be in tip-top shape again and able to continue your role in no time. That was a paraphrase quote from my self-healing weapons video, which I included because it really does get the point across. Hey, wait a minute.
Ah, so feeling.
Next up is a recent newfound favorite item synergy on my favorite class, Heavy's Dolichos Bar and Fast Gloves combo. This combo is interesting, as in the past, the two items included in it were so buggy in their interactions that they could literally grant Heavy infinite health, resulting in a stealth nerf to the Dolichos Bar that was never undone, but in their current state, these two items complement each other brilliantly. The Fast Gloves obviously drain Heavy's maximum health as he has them drawn, and the Dolichos Bar raises Heavy's max health on consumption. When you combine these two effects, you end up with a Heavy item set that effectively deletes both of these items' downsides and allows them to flourish as tools for staying in the fight. It's significantly faster to eat the Dolichos Bar and let your max health instantly refill over 4 seconds than to either wait for it to passively refill or jump back into the fight before you're ready. I have no idea how this interaction actually works on a code level, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if it was a microcosm of bugs working together to create this effect, but it's undeniably a powerful combo that keeps a Fast Glove Heavy in the fight when he needs it. Also keeps you from using the Buffalo Steak for movement speed, which is always good.
I'm done playing games with you, boy.
Next up, we have inarguably the most common knowledge, ubiquitous, and arguably hated combo on this list, Engineer's Frontier Justice and Gunslinger pair. Now, I realize that this combo is not underrated and is in fact widely hated by the community, especially by Scout, Soldier, and Demo Knight players, but let me remind you that the alternative here was the Rescue Ranger and Wrangler. Yeah. As is, I find the Frontier Slinger loadout to be an exceptionally fun alternative to the typical turtling engineer playstyle, allowing you to take a proactive and aggressive role on the battlefield and leveraging your 150 max health to beat the just a slower scout allegations. Plus, the Frontier Justice as a primary choice enables you to turn any wayward kills or assists your funny little aimbot nuisance earns into insane disposable snowballs. It really can't go understated just how easy it is to rack up entirely unearned kills and especially assists through splashing mini sentries in unexpected or important locations, and the Frontier Justice as a weapon is adept at capitalizing on their disposable nature. It's very difficult to not have at least one crit at all times while using this combo well. All in all, while this loadout may be the fun police, there is a reason that people use it and that it's earned its reputation.
Come over here. I promise I will heal you.
For Medic, we have another item combo I've talked about in detail before on this channel, the fabled Blutsauger and Solemn Vow team-up. Now, I am in no way attempting to posture that this pair is better in any way than the crossbow Ubersaw failsafe, but I'll be damned, it's still really fun. While these two weapons might not seem that synergistic, they actually complement each other's intended playstyles extraordinarily well. The Blutsauger is a more aggressive, combat-oriented syringe gun that encourages Medic to engage directly with enemies to take advantage of it, and the Solemn Vow allows you to see exactly how injured those enemies are before doing that. Simply put, this combo allows Medic to be incredibly accurate in picking and choosing his battles, selectively gauging which enemies are hurt enough to be worth safely engaging with. Being able to see enemy health and having definitive confirmation that you will be able to outdamage someone before fighting them is very powerful, and greatly facilitates the Blutsauger's more active and aggressive design. Knowledge is power, especially in a game where concrete damage numbers rule all, and this combo gives Medic all of the knowledge and thus power that he needs. I'd strongly recommend trying it if you're burnt out on traditional meta medic. It's basically a version of battle medic that can still help your team, and that's cool.
Bloody hell, you're awful.
Hey, you want to hear a loadout that you have to be fucking nuts to try out, like actually have that dog in you? Cleaner's Carbine plus Bushwhacker, baby. Everyone knows about the Girardi Bushwhacker combo. It's one of Sniper's most fundamental bread and butter item pairs, but what separates the Cleaner's Carbine Bushwhacker combo from it is how it's actually applied. When you splash Girardi on an enemy and hit them with the Bushwhacker, you're applying the source of the mini-crits to that enemy and then swiftly deleting them. With the Cleaner's Carbine combo, though, while it is certainly slower and more clumsy, you're putting the source of the mini-crits on the Sniper's weapons, allowing you to carry forward a spree of guaranteed crits for several seconds and potentially go on an insane roll. This is like unironically a really effective melee crit oriented combo and basically allows the sniper to 1v1 any enemy at point blank range so long as he can position himself properly and activate his mini crits at the right time. It's obviously still more niche than the Girardi Bushwhacker failsafe due to requiring building the Crikey meter compared to the instant splashability of Girardi, but if you're in the mood to make some very confused enemy team members doggedly pull up the TF2 wiki mid-match, this can be a fun sleeper combo. No, not that sleeper.
You're all of you quite out of your depth.
So, a common thread for every item synergy in this video has been that they've all been either unintentional or consequential of two unrelated items working really well together. For Spy, though, we actually have a proper intended item combo, the Saharan Spy set or the Latrange and the Your Eternal Reward. This combo is noteworthy for probably being the only deliberate Valve-curated item set in the game that still works as intended, and for also being basically the only way to use the Your Eternal Reward. After Valve started huffing paint and gave the YER a faster cloak drain rate, it was also given a unique interaction with the Latrange, where it'll completely mitigate its own cloak drain penalty while simultaneously cutting the Latrange's extended cloak in half. So, in essence, you still end up with a net increased cloak duration, just less than you would have without the YER, which is vitally important for a playstyle that otherwise nerfs literally every basic ability of your class. It's basically the only way to actually make use of the Your Eternal Reward these days, and since the Latrange is already a great weapon, you're not losing too much by trying it out. For keeping one of my favorite gimmick weapons in the game even remotely playable in the face of an unjust nerf, and for encouraging the use of my favorite spy revolver, I applaud the Saharan Spy set and its longevity within the game. I'm still not buying an unusual familiar fez though. And there are some of my favorite item synergies within TF2. I realize that not everything on this list is the most overlooked or underrated, so if even one person decides to try these loadouts out for the first time after watching this, I'll have considered this video a success. Always remember to keep on experimenting in TF2. Thanks, hope y'all have a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch y'all later. Cheers! I feel like something Team Fortress 2 doesn't get enough credit for is its weapon designs. And I don't mean their mechanical functional designs, there's enough discussion about that to fill its own New Age Library of Alexandria. I mean their visual designs. TF2 has a lot of incredibly creative, well-realized designs and concepts for guns in a first-person shooter, and I think that goes a long way in bolstering its comedic appeal and staying power. So in this video, I want to discuss my favorite weapon aesthetics in TF2. I want to note a few rules and addendums before we begin here though, just to weed out some potentially repetitive comments. Number 1, this is all just my opinion. I realize that's a pretty common YouTuber thing to say, but I really can't stress how subjective this video really is. For example, I don't care one bit about real-world historical firearms, or any given TF2 weapon's resemblance to them. You're not going to hear me talk about how Demo Man's Lock and Load is actually a really clever reference to the MP69 long-cock grenade launcher from 1939 Germany or whatever. I respect stuff like this, but it's nowhere near my field of interest or specialty. If that's what you like about a certain TF2 weapon, sound off in the comments or make your own video. This is all just one uneducated schmuck with a microphone's opinions on guns in a very old game. Secondly, we're going to be omitting reskins, Australiums, festives, and war paints from this discussion, as they're kind of manufactured by design to be aesthetically appealing, and it would feel like cheating to include them. If you're curious, my favorite Australium is the Black Box, my favorite festive is the Islander, and my favorite skin is Macabre Web. All that said, let's discuss every TF2 weapon that tickles my brain wrinkles to look at. Let's roll. Starting us off is Scout Sodas, the Bonk Atomic Punch and the Criticola. Not only do these two have very iconic retro marketing inspired designs that feel right at home in TF2's intended time period, but the textures for the cans themselves also feature a ton of details and hidden in-universe information about the soda Scout's been drinking. For instance, did you know that their primary ingredients are water, sugar, and radiation, or that they contain enough sugar to kill multiple people multiple times over? Fascinating stuff.
Additionally, I really like the Rap Assassin. This is a genius idea for a weapon, playing on that childhood nostalgia of becoming a Jedi Master using a discarded tube of wrapping paper. Its texture is also really glossy and colorful in a very appealing way, and I love its hit sound. I remember reading a YouTube comment a decade or so ago that suggested the way they recorded this was by having Gabe Newell himself run around Valve headquarters hitting people with a cardboard tube. And while that obviously isn't true, it is an image I've never been able to get out of my head, and is something I think about every time I hit someone with this weapon. For Soldier, I want to start off with the original. I know I mentioned at the top of this video that I don't care about historical weaponry, but I didn't say anything about video game history. The fact that the original is such a succinct and layered homage to Quake, one of the games that would most directly inspire TF2, is really cool to see, and the extent of the team's dedication to delivering on that homage is staggering. From the model, to the view model position, to the sounds, this weapon really is a loving tribute to the type of game that TF2 wouldn't exist without. Funny that TF2 itself probably could classify as a boomer shooter on its own these days though, huh? I also want to talk about the Liberty Launcher, a weapon that I don't think too many people have on their minds really ever, but it's hiding a clever secret. If you look right at the center of this gun, you might notice a cracked bell-shaped section of its barrel. And if you look at it removed from the rest of the gun, you'll notice that it's the Liberty Bell. Oh my god, that's so cool. Even as someone who doesn't care about history, this is such a well-executed and cheeky Easter egg hidden within the weapon's design that perfectly fits its theming and name that I just had to include it. Moving on to Pyro, I want to talk about the flare gun. This is straight up probably my single favorite weapon aesthetic in the game, and it's entirely because it activates my 8-brain impulses. I see shiny, I clap. Seriously though, the flare gun has such an immediately satisfying texture. It's this glossy, plasticky, reflective sheen that light just slides off of, and you know has the best texture in the game to actually hold. This thing is my TF2 equivalent to those satisfying to watch brain rot videos you see all the time. It just makes me happy. Next up is the Power Jack, and this one's really funny because I feel like a lot of people don't realize just what this thing actually is. A lot of us tend to internalize it as just a big industrial hammer or mallet, but make no mistake, this is an automobile jack with a car battery strapped to the end of it. And when you consider that a car jack weighs about... and that a car battery weighs about... yeah, Pyro definitely lifts. This one is just such a funny and extra design for me that I knew I had to include it. Your brain is mush if you're on the receiving end of this thing. Another Pyro melee I want to talk about is the sharpened volcano fragment. And listen, I know this weapon is really bad, but I cannot deny my 8-brain on this one. This weapon looks really badass. It's just a big, jagged chunk of flaming obsidian with a handle and a bunch of lava coursing through it. It's like the embodiment of every edgelord D&D player's deepest player character fantasies brought to life in an FPS game. I get that it's a bit tacky, but I just love how this thing looks. One last Pyro melee I want to talk about is the Neon Annihilator. This one was pretty easy to nail down. The neon vaporwave aesthetic is like an entire subgenre of visuals all on its own, and the fact that this weapon was clearly torn out of the ground in universe while still running is both a funny comedic detail and a great way to articulate its intended function. Also, this is one of very few melee weapons in the game that physically breaks upon a successful crit swing, which is something that typically only Demo Man can say about his melees. Demo Man only has one weapon I want to talk about, and it's the half Zatoichi. I know, it's a katana, which means it's Japanese, which makes it bad and cringe for some reason, I guess. But I really cannot deny how cool this thing is. Not only is its base design really unique within TF2, but it also has the distinctions of becoming covered with blood on a successful kill, and having its name be directly tied into its design. Its name references Zatoichi, a legendary blind swordsman in Japanese culture, so giving it to Demo Man, a class who's literally half blind, and Soldier, a class whose eyes are half covered, is a really funny commitment to the bit in my opinion. All around, an honorable weapon. Moving on to Heavy, he's only got 2 items I want to talk about, and both of them are food. First up is the sandwich, which is such a good design and concept. Not only is the idea of giving the game's literal tank a sandwich that he very much relishes in eating as a self-sustain method incredibly funny, but it also just looks really appetizing. Like, that's a pristine sandwich, every component so delicately sized and portioned and... oh, sorry, did I mention I'm fat? Either way, it's no wonder that the sandwich became such an iconic staple TF2 weapon. On the flip side, we have the Dolichos bar, a weapon I like less in game, yet like visually for similar reasons to both the sandwich and the flare gun. This is a pristine chocolate bar, so shiny and reflective while somehow not melting and maintaining its shape in the hot Badlands sun. If I could hold any TF2 weapon in real life, it'd definitely be the Dolichos bar. I wish my local convenience store carried chocolate bars with 8 sections the size of my hand that perfectly held their shape no matter the circumstances. Also, it's a small detail, but I love the little TF2 logo imprints on each section. Very cute detail. Hey, would you look at that? It's the whole reason I wanted to make this video. Medic's Quick Fix is such such a brilliant weapon design aesthetically that I'm surprised more people don't talk about it. In-game, it's designed to facilitate fast healing with less overheal and no invulnerability as a quick fix alternative to the other mediguns. And its design matches. It's clearly a slapdashed and modified blender, hastily put together, complete with a bird poop stain. It really articulates its role as the fast, short-term results devil with no care medigun, and is one of the most cohesive visual and gameplay designs in the game to me. And on a completely different note, the solemn bow is very funny. I really like the idea of Medic having such a thorough disrespect for medical ethics that he's okay with hitting people with a bust of the father of modern medicine, complete with do no harm being printed right there as he's killing people with it. Plus, this is a weirdly visceral and satisfying weapon to just clunk someone with. I really like that this is Medic's only unique unlockable melee that doesn't use his typical swing animation. Lastly, I've seen at least one person say that they thought this weapon's description meant it did no damage, and that's just very funny to me. Moving on to Sniper, I want to single out the Hitman's Heatmaker as my first choice for him. This is another weapon that I don't feel the general player base tends to think about that often, but I think its design is unironically really cool. From its truncated, compact, sleek build to its built-in suppressor and fittingly suppressed firing sound, this is a gun that masterfully slides into its role as Sniper's de facto Hitman sniper rifle, and is all around very aesthetically satisfying to use, complete with popping enemies' heads on a successful kill. Sniper is always an assassin to some extent, but this weapon really sells his polite professional shtick effectively. And the reason I call it his polite professional shtick specifically is the Girardi. I talked a lot about this weapon's concept and design in the stock replacement weapons video, but I really want to re-stress that the introduction of Girardi in 2009 is when TF2 really became TF2. When they added a literal jar of human piss as a weapon to what was then only a 2-year-old game is when TF2's true sensibilities were put on full display. This game was irreverent, large, and in charge, and was here to stay, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It's such an iconic game-defining idea for a weapon, and one that really only TF2 would realistically go for. Can you imagine Overwatch having something like this? All in all, funny. And lastly is Spy, and would you believe the class who canonically cares the most about his appearance has some really cool looking weapons? Let's start with the Ambassador. Now I know this thing lacks a lot of mechanical detail in terms of its actual function as a gun, but I really don't care about that and just think it looks really cool. It's a 50 cal with a rosewood grip and an engraving of a woman on the barrel, assumedly the wife of someone Spy is killed. It also has a really meaty firing sound to fit its role as Spy's de facto big damage revolver. If you had to use one weapon and no words to articulate the Spy's character to someone who's never played TF2, the Ambassador would be an easy #1 choice. Next up is the Conniver's Kunai, and I really don't feel like I should have to explain this one. It's a kunai, which are historically one of the most badass weapons ever conceived by man. I am aware that the way they're broadly portrayed in fiction isn't at all representative of their actual history, but that also goes for ninjas as a whole, and concern it, sometimes I just want to backstab someone with a historically inaccurate ninja weapon. Also, I'm sure y'all are expecting me to apologize for everything I said about this weapon in the past, but
hello, but I'm not sorry.
All in all, the kunai is just an immediately cool and enticing concept for a weapon, and one that I really wish was on a weapon that wasn't so controversial. And as our last weapon for this video, I want to discuss the Spycicle. Now, this weapon is cut from a very similar ideological cloth to the Rap Assassin, playing off of a classic childhood ideal, but in this case, it's the fear of having a jagged icicle fall off of your roof and impale you. When I first saw this weapon, I thought it was a shard of glass, and was immediately struck by its concept when I learned what it actually was. This is what I mean when I say TF2 is great at conceptualizing fun weapons and realizing those concepts. How many other games would have something like this? The Spycicle, fitting for its icy design, is very cool.
For a little bit too.
And there we have it, my favorite weapon aesthetics in TF2. I really want to stress again just how impressed I am with TF2's ability to come up with immediately enticing, unique, game-defining weapon ideas, and then fully realize them on a gameplay and execution level. There are so many weapons in this game that are absolutely game-defining. Some of the first things people think about when they think Team Fortress 2, and concepts that no other game would be anywhere near brave enough to attempt. TF2 really is a brilliant game on a concept and design level, and one that I feel like we should give more credit for its visuals and aesthetics in that regard. Either way, thanks, hope you all had a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch you all later. Cheers!
I'm sure that every TF2 player has a weapon or two that they really hate. For reasons as broad as it's just not fun to fight against, to reasons as specific and bloated as its design compromises the gameplay integrity of this video game. Regardless of your reason though, I think all of us can agree that some weapons in TF2 are just really annoying. In a game as old as Team Fortress 2 with over 130 unlockable weapons, it kinda comes with the territory that there would be some that aren't quite up to snuff with others in terms of fun factor to play against. Everyone has their own personal boogeyman weapons, but recently, I wanted to try and figure out what my personal least favorite to fight against was. Which TF2 weapon elicits the most viscerally negative reaction from me when I see an enemy using it? That's what I wanted to figure out. So here's what I did. I looked at a list of every weapon in the game, carefully curated a smaller list of one for each class that specifically annoyed me, and then matched them up against each other in a sort of coliseum of hatred. In this video, I want to discuss my findings. We're going to be briefly discussing what I believe to be each class's most annoying weapon to fight against, and try to figure out which is the true king of TF2 horse hockey, from my perspective anyways. We'll place each weapon on a tier list, and whoever ranks the highest will be my pick for TF2's most annoying weapons. The tiers will be the lowest tier, being that'll be just fine, followed by salvageable if reworked, followed by best left removed, and finally the king of slop on top. If you disagree with any of my findings, sound off in the comments. Otherwise, let's point and laugh at some of this game we love's biggest design failings. I want to stress that this video is in no way intended to be an indictment on you if you enjoy using any of these weapons. Contrary to the opinions of some TF2 players, what weapons you use in a 17-year-old video game is not at all reflective of your real-life character, and it'll do us all well to remember that sometime. All that said, let's dive in.
What's the matter? You freaking stupid?
Starting us off is Scout, and he's in an interesting position to start off with because I struggle to think of any one item on him that makes him exceptionally annoying to fight. It's kind of just baked into his design. Like, when I think about getting annoyed fighting Scout, it's because he's flying around me like a twitchy mosquito and hammering me with 100+ damage meat shots, and not anything to do with his unlocks. I almost settled on things like the Soda Popper and Rap Assassin until I realized that the answer was in the jar the whole time. The Mad Milk is a controversial TF2 weapon for a reason. While it is very committal to use due to its lengthy cooldown, a well-aimed Mad Milk toss can absolutely be a match decider under the right circumstances. Splashing this item on enemies causes 60% of all damage they take to be returned to the attacker as healing, meaning that all a Scout needs to do to grant him and his entire team game-winning self-sustain is blind toss a jar of suspicious white liquid at the enemy and hope for the best. In a 1v1 specifically, a Scout who can land his shots is pretty much impossible to outdamage when he's hit you with this, as he'll be healing in excess of 60 health with every successfully landed meat shot. If you're someone who really cares about tracking damage numbers and paying attention to damage thresholds in this game, getting splash of this item will certainly drive you up the wall. In a teamfight environment, this weapon can single-handedly push the Scouts using its side to victory, providing unparalleled self-sustain to everyone who gets a chance to land an attack on the coded enemies. It's a very rewarding weapon to take full advantage of, in addition to being very splashable into a wide variety of loadouts. That said, the Mad Milk is also exceptionally committal to use, as its tremendous cooldown make it so that game-winning pushes caused by it are very few and far between, and makes it so that the Scout has to be very picky-choosy in how he uses it. If he uses it to douse a fire, he'll be out of it for his next team fight, and if he uses it in his next team fight, he won't have it next time he's up in smoke. So while the Mad Milk is very annoying to be on the receiving end of, I struggle to call it one of the game's top most annoying weapons due to the fact that it isn't entirely free to make use of. With a smaller percentage of health returned on hit, I think it could be totally fine. I'll place it in the salvageable if reworked tier as a result.
Time to inform your next of kin!
For Soldier, we have a weapon that I've actually gone to bat for in the past and have never felt as negatively about as others. I actually hate rocket jumping soldiers way more than users of this weapon, but in my heart of hearts, I know that that's just me, and that Soldier's true most annoying weapon for most people is the black box. Now, this is a special case, as this is a weapon that I personally find to be extremely well balanced. It heals up to 20 health per rocket, but only loads 3 rockets per clip, giving it an all-around lower attack uptime and DPS than any other rocket launcher in exchange for some handy self-sustain. The reason people hate this thing is that it can really mess up in-the-moment damage calculations and thresholds. It admittedly feels like utter dog shit to land what should be a guaranteed amount of shots to kill a soldier on him, and have him narrowly survive for the kill because his rockets are leeching your health with every bit of splash damage. Not unlike the Mad Milk, if you're the kind of person who lives and dies by the purity of this game's damage thresholds, you'll likely hate the black box. It's also worth noting that this item is a key component to one of TF2's most reviled weapon synergies, but let's save talking about that for a later date. I don't think it's fair to hold a consequential item combo against a single weapon for the purposes of the discussions in this video. On its own though, the black box is certainly annoying in the fringe situation where the up to 20 health difference will definitively lose you a fight, but I personally find these situations to not be super common outside of 1v1s between soldiers and other power classes, and honestly find the black box's lack of a fourth rocket to be a much more weapon defining stat than its self-healing. It really can't go overstated just how much soldier lives and dies by his clip, and any weapon that shrinks it will likely have an uphill battle for relevancy. So while I do understand the vitriol for the black box by some players, I also ultimately find it to genuinely be one of TF2's more thoughtfully designed and balanced weapons, and for that reason, I'll charitably place it in the that'll be just fine tier. This one was really close to teetering into the tier above it though, trust me, and if we were considering the conch combo with it, it would definitely be up there. Pyro is an absolutely no shortage of annoying weapons. This class as a whole is basically a living example of everything not to do when designing content for a competitive multiplayer game. They have annoyingness baked into their core design, with hefty damage over time and non-committal CC and displacement being among their core abilities. And while common picks for their most annoying weapon like the Phlogistinator or Thermal Thruster are definitely tempting, you just can't beat classics like the Scorch Shot. The Scorch Shot is one of TF2's big boogeymen, a weapon that everyone except the Pyro using it absolutely hates. When you equip this weapon, you're basically signing your soul away at the same time, offering insanely non-committal long-range damage and CC, ridiculously generous afterburn that can guarantee kills from across the map, a generous splash zone for damage, guaranteed mini-crits that can combo off of themselves, and even added mobility as a perk. This weapon really does it all. The amount of brain cells you need to successfully use this weapon could give the average Twitter apologist a run for their money, and it's all wrapped up in a package that's just as easy to use as it is startlingly effective for that ease of use. What's crazy too is that this is all stuff that the detonator does as well, but arguably better, with a harsher learning curve and more effective damage over time and mobility to boot. So you could get good at the game and learn a weapon that rewards timing, accuracy, and positioning, or you could just press mouse 1 from across the map and deal over 100 damage. The Scorch Shot is easily one of my personal least favorite TF2 weapons to be on the receiving end of, and for that, I'll place it in the best left removed tier.
Time to get blotted!
Moving on to Demo Man, he's another class that I feel doesn't have an immediately obvious pick for his most annoying weapon. The Sticky Bomb Launcher can be busted as hell when used for spam, but it's also a stock weapon, and I really don't want to include those in this video. The whole Demo Knight set can become insurmountable with a good game state and some luck, but also requires being allowed to reach that point to flourish. After some careful consideration, I kinda realized that Demo Man's only true annoying unlockable, in my opinion, on its own merits, is the Loose Cannon. So full transparency, this is the least annoying weapon in the video, and it's only here because we need a Demo Man pick. Yes, it is quite frustrating to be bounced around by a beach ball by this weapon's 50 damage shots, and yes, it is annoying when you get one shot as a light class by a well-aimed and placed double donk, but that's the thing. While these traits are annoying to be on the receiving end of, they are in no way free or even easy for the Demo Man compared to other stuff we'll discuss in this video. The Loose Cannon has one of the most obtuse designs in the game, coming with a ton of baked-in knowledge and skill checks that are entirely unique to it. Between its slow and tumbling projectile, its multi-hitting attacks, its fuse charging mechanic, and its all-around janky nature, the Loose Cannon genuinely is a weapon that requires getting good with to get the most out of it. Compared to pretty much every other weapon in this video, there is a clear and pronounced difference between a skilled and unskilled Loose Cannon Demo Man. It's also fun as hell and one of the funniest weapons in the game, so I struggle to reconcile with putting this weapon alongside other annoying heavy hitters in the game for this video. This will easily be our lowest ranked weapon for the entire video, resting very snugly in the that'll be just fine tier.
Fight like Big Mac!
Next up is Heavy, my personal favorite class, and one who I feel has a single very obvious choice for this video. We can joke all we want about how heavy mains don't exist and how the ones who do always stick to the same bread and butter weapon sets, but you'd better count yourself lucky that it is that way, because we would not want to contend with a higher ratio of Natasha users. The Natasha is genuinely a poorly conceived TF2 weapon. Why does the fastest firing, highest sustained damage dealing weapon category in the game need a side grade that also slows enemies on top of its tremendous damage output. Does heavy really need that? Are enemies who are close enough to be slowed not also up shit creek without a paddle already? This is a prime example of one mechanic and one stat completely compromising a weapon conceptually, and it's fucked up because it's the weapon's main mechanic. Slowdown effects are incredibly rare in TF2, and they're only split between this thing and the Sandman. Your options for slowdown on a weapon are a once every few seconds single-use projectile that does 15 damage, or a fucking minigun. And yeah, while it does deal less damage than its alternatives, it's still a minigun, and its output combined with its slowing effect granting you more time to shoot enemies means that its damage penalty is pretty negligible. Even in situations where it isn't, it also comes with a baked-in damage resistance below half health, meaning that heavy can stay in the fight longer to make up for its compromised damage output. I'm kind of a Natasha apologist, as I like using heavy's more atypical options more than the average bear, but I also kind of end up feeling a bit dirty after using it each time, like I'm breaking some kind of unspoken rule. For that reason, I'll be placing the Natasha alongside the Scorch Shot in the best left removed tier.
Come here, sissy.
On to Engineer, and I don't even gotta hide his choice. You know it, and I know it. It's the Wrangler. This is a weapon that's been well documented in the community's derision of it. It's seen as a brain-dead, non-committal tanking option for Engineer sentries that turns one of the best area denial tools in the game into also one of the tankiest ones, granting sentries an effective health value that exists in excess of 600 in exchange for the crippling downside of... This weapon grants Engineer some of the most reliable area holding capabilities in the game for very little input on his part. The sheer amount of insane damage soaking potential you gain by pulling out the Wrangler is almost silly, and when you combine that with the Engineer also taking manual control of his sentry gun, being able to fire outside of its effective range, and doubling the sentry's firing rate, and you've got a weapon that goes from a handy utility to a damn near essential tool for defensive play. That said, I don't think the Wrangler belongs in the best left removed tier, at least not all of it. Taking manual control of your sentry gun is fun, and does grant you access to some neat tech and unique sentry spots. I think that if this weapon were just that, the manually controlling your sentry, we'd have a real winner on our hands. However, the addition of a 66% damage shield on top of that is what really pushes this weapon over the edge, and turns what would be a fun and intuitive shakeup tool into what it is now. Because of this, I'm gonna tentatively place the Wrangler in the salvageable if reworked tier. If we did away with, or even just toned down the shield, we'd be looking at an entirely different weapon. The tiers above this are for items that are screwed conceptually. They're bad at their cores. This weapon is savable. It just has to come out of its shell and stop hiding behind its shield.
You are trying my patience!
Next up is Medic, and he's our third class in a row with an obvious, easy-bake choice. You want to know how you turn the game's respected, dedicated soul healer into the most hated thing on the battlefield? Fuck. Yeah, everyone hates the Vaccinator, and it's not even any argument. This is another weapon that I feel is just bad on the inside, like it has an ugly soul. Granting a constant 10% resistance to a chosen damage type, buffing that to 75% plus full crit resistance on top of that with an Uber, and uncompromised healing compared to stock is absolutely deplorable, and the fact that the Uber charge is both the only one in the game that's granted in incredibly disposable chunks of 25, and allows the medic and his heal target to continue capturing objectives under its effects, really cements this thing's place as one of the game's most hated weapons. It really is the fuck you in particular medigun, doing nothing for the medic and his heal target but pissing off at least one member of the enemy team at a time. And when you consider that cycling between resistances comes at no cost and that it can in fact be done fast enough to stack multiple resistances on one target, and you might be starting to understand the Vaccinator's reputation. It's not even like especially good. A single Uber with this thing is nowhere near as impactful or game-changing as an Uber with any other medigun. It just makes the back medic and his heal target a constant annoying blemish on the map they're on, like a pimple that won't go away. Removing the agency of enemy players to fight back against you is already bound to earn you some enemies, but when you combine this with the weapon's other bells and whistles, its incredibly generous Uber rate, and you've got a vile little thing on your hands that really has no place in the game. This is a medigun that you need to be fully committed to using when you equip it. You don't bring it to break a specific hold or clear a specific group of enemies. You equip the Vaccinator knowing that you're going to piss people off with it. And for all of these reasons, I'm currently placing the Vaccinator in the best left removed tier.
Let's see how much blood's in you.
Sniper is funny for this video because he is, by all accounts, the most hated class in the game in general. It's hard to pick a definitive most annoying weapon when pretty much everything this class is capable of has already been harshly scrutinized by the community at large for years. Yes, Sniper is indeed TF2's #1 punching bag. Okay, yeah, Jarate is Sniper's most annoying weapon, and it's not even close. While things like the Bizarre Bargain and Sydney Sleeper certainly do exist in the game, they are at the very least weapons that require some degree of mechanical aiming skill to make the most out of. The Jarate, while very iconic and funny, is another very easy to use, very impactful, and very splashable weapon that improves virtually every loadout it's equipped on. Conventional game design logic would lead you to believe that the game's dedicated long-range instant kill class shouldn't be able to instant kill people at close range as well, but since when was TF2 ever conventional? By splashing Jarate on an enemy or group of enemies, you've added a crippling condition to the fight for them, making every bit of damage they take hurt substantially more, and making their time to act and fight back much stricter. You're effectively tossing a 33% extra damage AoE debuff at enemies every time you throw this thing, and that debuff is splashable on multiple enemies at the same time. The amount of impact a well-timed Jarate toss can have on the outcome of a match is staggering, and unlike the Mad Milk, which functions similarly but is on a class who's much more likely to be active on the front lines, Sniper can afford to be liberal with his Jarate usage because he's less likely to absolutely need it at any given moment. It's very funny to me that one of TF2's most impactful weapons is a literal jar of human piss, and whichever way you may slice it, this is an annoying weapon. Regardless, I'll be placing it in the salvageable if reworked tier, if only because it shares a lot of mechanics with other salvageable tier weapon, the Mad Milk. Lengthen its cooldown or shrink its area of effect, and I think it would be a lot less severe.
You disgust me.
And for our last weapon in the video, our spy pick, we've got the lamest fucking weapon in the game, the Dead Ringer. I feel like this might be a controversial choice, as I'm sure some people would stand by the Diamondback or Conniver's Kunai as Spy's most annoying weapon, but please bear with me. The problem with the Dead Ringer isn't just that it enables Spy to play in a hyper-aggressive manner that the game was never designed to accommodate. It isn't just that it allows him to throw himself into enemies knowing he has a free get-out-of-jail-free card. It isn't just that it shuns its own admittedly cool death feigning mechanic in favor of a mindless face tanking strategy, but it's also because it single-handedly enables pretty much every other widely hated Spy strategy to flourish. The Conniver's Kunai is very impactful if Spy manages to land a backstab with it, but it becomes even more so when he's got a free get-out-of-jail-free card for making a mistake. The Diamondback has insane snowball potential and grants Spy ridiculous damage potential, but becomes even more ridiculous when Spy is never truly at risk of losing his allocated crits. If there's a controversial Spy strategy you can think of, then I promise you that it's at the very least bolstered in some way by the presence of the Dead Ringer. I don't like throwing around claims like this, as I am not a professional game designer by any stretch, but the Dead Ringer seems genuinely poorly designed for me. And if the fact that Valve has tried and failed at numerous points to rework this weapon doesn't cue you into that fact, then surely its reputation will. This is another surefire choice for the best left removed tier. So, where are we at? Well, we have 4 weapons in our top tier, and they're all diligently fighting for our prestigious Lord of Slop title. We've got the Scorch Shot, a brain-dead easy weapon that does just a bit too much for just a bit too little. The Natasha, a poorly conceived weapon that gives Heavy an ability he should never have. The Vaccinator, a downright despicable weapon that laughs in the face of most of the game's 9 classes. And the Dead Ringer, a true bastion of poor design in TF2 that enables some of the most disgusting playstyles for the class it's featured on. I deliberated a lot over which weapon to give our prestigious title, and after a bit of consideration, I landed on the Vaccinator. It's the Vaccinator. I think the Vaccinator is TF2's most annoying weapon. While the others I've talked about here do feel poorly designed and conceived, they do at the very least fill niches in their class's lineups, and don't feel nearly as personal to fight against as the Vac. The Vaccinator is a weapon that doesn't do much in the broad strokes of the average TF2 match, aside from making the medic and his heal target incredibly difficult to kill in the most annoying, ever-present manner possible. It requires very little thought, commitment, or game state savvy to use well, and despite posturing itself as a thinking man's medigun, all that the thought required really boils down to is remembering where your reload button is on your keyboard and rapidly cycling between resistances. For giving a proud, defiant middle finger to at least one person on the enemy team at all times, and for doing so without an ounce of humor or conceptual uniqueness, the Vaccinator is our winner for today. Or loser, depending on how you look at it. Here's our finalized tier list for reference. But what do you think? Did I overrate certain weapons or underrate others? Do you really like the Scorch Shot or really hate some innocuous random weapon like the Pain Train? Sound off in the comments. This is just my perspective and I'm excited to hear yours. Just to be civil. Thanks, hope y'all had a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch y'all later. Cheers. As of right now, Team Fortress 2 received its last major balance patch on March 28th, 2018, or close to 7 years ago as I'm recording this. Before that, it received its last major proper content update, Jungle Inferno, on October 20th, 2017. While certain TF2 players are still diligently holding out for that promise but never delivered heavy update, it's unfortunately more likely than not that TF2 will never receive another significant balance patch. Honestly, I'm thankful that the game is still playable and supported at all of these years later, and personally find the state that the game was left in to be mostly fine. There are bugs, wacky balance, and a lot of cosmetic bloat, but the core gameplay integrity is still present and solid, and that's what matters. That said, not every item in the game was left in the best state. Jungle Inferno and Blue Moon saw a host of hefty weapon nerfs that none of us knew at the time would be the states these weapons would be left in virtually forever. If you're a new or prospective TF2 player, you might not even know about these weapons' former glory days. So in this video, I want to discuss what I believe to be the biggest losers of TF2's current, as of right now, final balance state. Weapons that were left at soccer practice by Valve while their friends go to sneak into R-rated movies. The main thing I want to note here is that we are not just discussing bad weapons, but specifically weapons that were nerfed significantly and hung out to dry in TF2's last major balance update. Maybe it'll give you some renewed perspective on these items. All that said, let's roll. Let's start out with one of the most iconic, ubiquitous, and staple weapons of old TF2 that unfortunately hasn't been usable properly in close to a decade, the Sandman. Now, if you weren't around for it, this was one of the most recognizable weapons in the game for a long time. Not only was it one of Scout's first unlockable items, but it was so key to his character that it was even given to his portable Merc figurine, and was also arguably one of the strongest weapons in TF2's history at its peak. This weapon used to inflict a variable amount of complete guaranteed stun on targets who were struck by its ball, stopping them in place and rendering them helpless to follow-up attacks at max range, or putting them into the humiliation state at shorter ranges. There was a ton of emphasis put on this stun effect, with Scout having unique voice lines for it, and several unique mechanics and interactions being designed around it. While this was very powerful and very fun to pull off, it was also inarguably pretty unfun to be on the receiving end of, leading to this weapon's crippling nerf in the Jungle Inferno update. This nerf was a simple one in concept that didn't seem to mean too much at first, yet quickly revealed itself to be absolutely crushing in execution. It removed the Sandman's stun effect, instead leaving enemies of the retained ability to fire their weapon, and inducing a few seconds of slowdown on impact with its ball. This was done on top of retaining the weapon's flat -15 max health on wearer, a stat that was present to counteract the utility of being able to completely stun enemies, which is enormously too harsh for what Valve changed this weapon's positive into. This basically made the Sandman go from one of Scout's most ubiquitous commonplace weapons to an arguable bottom 5 weapons in the entire game contender. It's a shame too, because this is one of the game's most staple weapons, and one that prospective new players might not understand the full context of should they unlock it and try it out themselves without knowing its history. While I understand that its old design was definitely a bit much, the patch state that it was left in post Jungle Inferno is arguably too little, and I would have loved to see a compromise somewhere along the way to keep the Sandman just a bit more present in players' minds. Talk about not respecting your elders. And talking about iconic staple Scout weapons that were hung out to dry, we've got the Bonk Atomic Punch. Now, full disclosure, this is one of the better weapons we'll be discussing in this video, as it still retains its core niche of slipping past enemies and distracting sentries especially well. That said, it's also inarguably in the weakest position it's ever been in TF2's current patch state, especially considering that its last update was also the most significant nerf that it ever received. Using the Bonk Atomic Punch renders Scout completely invincible for 8 seconds, at the cost of making him unable to fire his weapon for its effect duration. This makes its intended use case as an infiltration tool that allows Scout to slip past sentries pretty clear. However, it was apparently too clear, as Valve thought fit to add a condition to this effect in Jungle Inferno. Any damage taken while under the Bonk's effects will inflict a variable amount of slowdown to the Scout after its invincibility ends, with the amount going as high as a 50% move speed reduction after consuming more than 200 damage. This is remarkably easy to do, especially in the case of attempting to slip past sentries or a particularly rigid defensive hold, and makes Scout just about as vulnerable as he can possibly be under normal gameplay circumstances. Scout's main skill for staying alive is his mobility, and if you're being slowed to half your move speed while being chased by a group of enemies who just saw you slip past their sentry, you're basically a sitting duck once that invuln wears off. Add on to this the fact that the effect duration of the slowdown is always 5 seconds, regardless of how much damage was consumed, and you have a situation where it becomes pretty difficult to stay alive post-bonk. And while I do understand the nerf, as the old free version of the bonk was definitely annoying whenever a Scout managed manage to get behind and spawn camp at no fault of your team, it is most certainly in a weaker position than the weapon has ever been in before. Not the biggest loser of this list, but definitely one that's not operating at peak performance anymore. Moving on to Soldier, he's got a staggering 3 weapons for this list. It's almost like a class being a black sheep of the game's most common competitive lineup would lead to a lot of contentious balance discussions or something. That said, our first choice for him is an interesting one, in that it's a weapon that was purely contentious in specific competitive formats and not at all in most casual ones, the base jumper. This parachute is a funny little guy, primarily because most players unfamiliar with the game's competitive history would not have any reason to think that it ever needed a nerf. It's a parachute for Soldier and Devilman that allows them to lightly float through the air, enhancing their dive bomb potential at the risk of making them easier to smack out of the sky. This is what it's always been for, and most players tend to see it as a harmless gimmick at worst. However, prior to Jungle Inferno, it was even stronger in this intended niche, as it allowed players to redraw and redeploy their parachutes as many times as they'd like during a descent, while also not compromising their air movement. This was fine to most casual players, and added some extra maneuverability to the dive bombing and market gardening playstyles. However, certain portions of the competitive community very vocally did not like it. In 6s specifically, it was cited as throwing off the game's pace, making it difficult for staple precision classes like Demoman, snipers, and enemy soldiers to land air shots, allowing demos and soldiers to remain suspended in the air for entire rounds, and all around impeding on the flow and purity of comp play, leading to the removal of its redeploy feature and halving of its users' air maneuverability. And listen, I was not playing 6's Soldier or Demo at the time that this problem existed, so I can't speak from first-hand experience on how necessary the nerf was, but I do come from a background in fighting games and other highly competitive formats with a history of contentious balance, and I'm aware that the decision to actually nerf this weapon was ultimately on Valve and not the competitive community. Comp players did have issues with it, but Valve were the ones who chose to nerf it. Competitive players are not a scapegoat for unpopular balance decisions. However, if the base jumper truly was such a problem, surely you could have just banned it in 6s, like what usually happens to pretty much every other problem weapon in this regard. The base jumper is in an unfortunate position because it's one of the only examples of a weapon in the game that was specifically problematic in one competitive format and not at all in any other play environment, which is not a healthy state for a weapon to exist in a highly competitive game. A weapon like this is always going to piss someone off, and regardless of where you stand on it, it's most certainly one of TF2's current biggest losers. Onto another multi-class weapon that's usable on Soldier, we have the Reserve Shooter. This is another funny one, as if you're unfamiliar with this weapon's history, you'd probably have no idea that it used to be one of the single most hated items in the game. And to its credit, it's got nothing to do with Soldier. Its niche on him has always remained exactly the same. You pop enemies up with a rocket, switch guns, and reserve shoot them. Short, sweet, and to the point. No, it was this weapon's use case on another class that earned it its former reputation. A use case on a much more controversial class. Yeah, Reserve Shooter Pyro used to be in steady contention for the most despised loadout in the entire game. Basically, prior to Jungle Inferno, air blasting an enemy as Pyro counted as having popped them up for the purposes of the Reserve Shooter's mini-crits, allowing for a very easy, cheap, and consistent puff and tap combo where you would press mouse 2, press 2, and press mouse 1. Bada boom, you've confirmed yourself a free kill. When you combine this with the Degreaser's faster weapon switch and some afterburn, you had a recipe for an absolutely despicable Pyro combo on your hands that could easily 1 or 2 tap a lot of the game's classes. For a good while, this was considered the TF2 crutch loadout, a satisfying to pull off, yet an arguably easy and blisteringly effective combo that could carry any Pyro player of any skill level to victory. So, after a few years, Valve took this weapon out back and silently gave it the old Yeller treatment, removing its ability to mini-crit after an air blast from Pyro. This made it pretty much useless on the class, but to be fair, Soldier's usage of it has never changed at all, and it now rests as the ever-present, always the bridesmaid, never the bride of TF2 secondary shotguns. I mean, it could be worse. Oh man, not this guy again. Look, I've already talked about the Righteous Bison 2 or 3 times on this channel, and even if I hadn't, everyone knows of its tragic history at Valve's hands, and just why it's such an unfortunate weapon. Initially used as nothing more than a fringe if fun meme and gimmick tool, this weapon was beaten down again and again by Valve for seemingly no reason, consistently nerfing it, lying about its mechanics, changing fundamental principles of its design, and all around leaving it in a worse position than pretty much every other weapon in the game when all said and done. Even in Jungle Inferno, Inferno, where they claim to have reverted its past nerfs. They were still secretly nerfing it. It's frustrating too, because at literally no level of play, or in any play environment, was the Righteous Bison ever considered broken, overpowered, or problematic. Pretty much every player always understood it as a silly goof weapon that could occasionally come in clutch, and if it had only received 1 or 2 mechanical nerfs to iron out its more janky aspects, I think it would have been fine. But holy shit, the amount of disrespect and targeted butchering Valve directed at this weapon is unlike anything else I've ever seen in this game. I guess you could say it's a weapon Valve actively hates. Next up, let's talk about a weapon that's near and dear to my heart, despite being borderline unusable these days: Heavy's Eviction Notice. This is another weapon that's in stiff competition as one of the worst items in the game, and it's unfortunate too, because it's only due to its association with another weapon. Prior to Jungle Inferno, this pair of brass knuckles gave Heavy a slight movement speed buff while they were active, swung faster than his default fists, and granted a short speed boost on a successful punch at the cost of dealing less damage than the stock fists, even accounting for the faster swing speed, and making Heavy take slightly more damage while they were active. They were clearly intended as the rush down, pummel your enemy's melee alternative for heavies who wanted to roleplay as their favorite JoJo characters. Unfortunately though, that faster move speed that they happened to boast overlapped pretty heavily with another one of Heavy's key melee weapons in the fast gloves. Due to those being changed to drain Heavy's max health while they were active in Jungle Inferno, Valve saw it fit to do the same thing to the brass knuckles. This was purely done so that both of Heavy's speed boosting weapons had the same downside, and that neither gave their speed boost for free or overlapped with each other. And while the fast gloves made it out of this transition pretty unfazed, the same cannot be said for the much more combat-oriented Eviction Notice. They're basically useless in their core offensive niche now, being too risky to use for combat and being strictly worse than the fast gloves for speed boosting. This doesn't even account for Heavy's other much stronger melee utilities, and it really sucks. These used to be my preferred Heavy melee back before Jungle Inferno, and I would honestly prefer it if Valve removed their passive move speed buff entirely and just left them as the fast-firing, pummel-oriented melee alternative, because even if it wasn't good, it'd still be usable and serve a purpose that wasn't filled better by other options in Heavy's melee slot. Either way, this is a weapon that I used to love, but just can't bring myself to use anymore. I guess you can fucks with the Nux after all. As our penultimate weapon for this video, we have one that was never necessarily good, yet is undoubtedly very fun in BM in the hands of someone who knows how to use it, and used to be even more so: the Sydney Sleeper. Now, let's not mince words. This weapon is objectively pretty bad, even if I find it to be quite fun when used in the right context. Flashing Girardi on your enemies, or just outright one-shotting them with that glorious golden cloud, never stops being satisfying. However, that funny little cloud actually used to serve a much more concrete purpose than it does now. From the Meet Your Match update all the way to the Blue Moon update, fully charged body shots and headshots with this weapon actually applied Girardi in a radius around the intended target, effectively acting as a long-range version of the secondary Girardi signature splash. On top of this, the max duration of the Sydney Sleeper's Girardi effect was capped at 8 seconds rather than 5. This was easily the best state that the weapon ever existed in, and actually allowed it to fill its intended role as a support-oriented debuffing sniper rifle pretty handily. If you could focus on shooting large groups of enemies, you could have a pretty sizable impact on the outcome of a match just by shooting people and splashing their teammates around them. That said, this effect was also pretty frustrating, as it allowed for a sniper to apply a game-changing debuff from behind the comfort of his team at no risk to himself up to 25 times per clip. Due to this, in the Blue Moon update, Valve saw it fit to rework this weapon. And by rework, I mean shoot it in the leg and then put a band-aid on it. This update removed the weapon's Girardi splash effect and cut its minimum effect duration down to 5 seconds, completely gimping its supportive capabilities. But don't worry, Valve also added the Nature's Call mechanic, which reduces your Girardi's cooldown by 1 second every time you land a scoped headshot. And when you consider that Girardi has a 20-second cooldown, and that it takes approximately 2 seconds to line up and fire each scoped headshot, assuming you're hitting each one with perfect timing and accuracy every time, and that the Sydney Sleeper is intended to combo with the Darwin's Danger Shield, and hey, wait a minute, this stat is dog shit. Yeah, the Blue Moon update left the Sydney Sleeper in arguably a worse position than it's ever been in. This update's changes to this item represent a fundamental misunderstanding of its core niche and use, and really shows that Valve was losing touch with balancing the game at this point. I just want to pee on people, man, come on. And lastly is probably the most infamous nerf in TF2's history, at least for the patch state we're currently discussing. It's been described as every spy main's day of mourning, a tragic day that would always be remembered. While for others, it was the Jungle Inferno updates day, for spy mains, it was the Ambassador nerfs day. Now, quick history lesson. The Ambassador used to be the spy gun. It was the definitive best in slot choice for this class's primary, or secondary, I guess, weapon, allowing for flashy skill expression and insane damage for people who could use it well. Boasting ridiculous damage potential from any range thanks to its no fall off crit headshots, it's easy to see why so many players love this weapon. Then, Valve killed it. In Jungle Inferno, citing dissatisfaction with Spy's ability to kill players from across the map, Valve added a unique damage fall-off mechanic to this weapon's crit headshots, making it the only weapon in the game to feature damage fall-off on its critical hits. Its high-skill, high-reward headshots now deal around 54 damage at maximum range, or not even enough to two-shot a light class or even one-shot a kunai spy. This really gimped the item's weapon-defining skill expression and burst damage, and while it is still just as effective at short range, with its classic two-tap combo working just as well, it's inarguably in a worse position overall than it was ever before this. And to an extent, I do understand it, because allowing Spy to effectively one-shot people from long range is kind of silly when he's already capable of backstabs, yet at the same time, I don't know how many Spy mains, outside of cheaters and less honest players, were really taking advantage of the insane long-range damage potential that Valve nerfed this weapon over. All in all, while the Ambassador is still certainly usable, it's also in much harsher contention with the Diamondback as the dedicated crit revolver now, and surely is a far cry from its former glory. Never forget. So, what have we learned? Well, honestly, despite having less than charitable opinions about some of these nerfs, I'm honestly impressed and thankful that the overall balance state of the game isn't worse in general. It's pretty clear that, by the point of these two updates, Valve was losing touch with how to properly balance TF2. So the fact that only a handful of unlocks were left in such a miserable state, and that the overall integrity and game flow of TF2 was still mostly left intact is very admirable. If a game's not going to receive balance patches anymore, I can see a million alternate timelines where things are way worse. While I may be sad about the base jumper, the Sandman, the eviction notice, or the Sydney sleeper, I'm still glad that Valve took such care and attention to leaving the game in a relatively healthy state. All in all, could be better, but could certainly be a lot worse. But they didn't nerf the vaccinator, so bad. Either way, thanks, hope y'all had a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch you all later. Cheers! Hey there everyone, so a bit of context for this video. A few months ago, I announced that if my second channel, Opal Reviews Everything, managed to reach 5,000 subscribers by the end of 2024, I would make a video reviewing every heavy hat in Team Fortress 2. And while we didn't manage to reach that goal, unfortunately, I also stopped posting on Opal Reviews Everything after a certain point to focus in on making TF2 content on this channel, and I figured it wasn't entirely fair to hold my lack of activity on that channel against you guys for the purposes of this promise. So in this video, I wanted to hold true to what I said, and we'll be reviewing every heavy hat in Team Fortress 2 in 10 words or less. We're just gonna take a look at every heavy hat in TF2 with these neat little SFM renders I made of each one, and talk about just how I feel about each one in 10 words or less. I want to stress, we are only talking about hats in this video. That is not miscellaneous items, so beards, shirts, the chicken Kiev, nothing like that we'll be discussing. Just hats that can be worn on the heavy's head, most of which can be unusual. Also, I feel like I do need to mention that these are just all my opinions. I feel like that goes without saying in a video like this, but I do realize that this is all incredibly subjective. I have my own taste, you have yours. If you have a hat that you love, that you have a cool high tier unusual of, or fits into your loadout perfectly, you're entirely entitled to have that. These are all just my views. All that said, thanks, hope you enjoy, happy holidays, and let's dive in. Funny if weakened by very obnoxious memes. Still good though. Very solid if expensive, unusual, and kind of basic. Very cute and silly even if the heavy's not friendly. Nice Elvis reference, and free sunglasses are a nice bonus. Another decent hat, not my personal favorite, just okay. Very funny low tier unusual, made worthless by the undercover brawly. Functionally worthless on anything but boxer or wrestler loadouts, ugly. Absolutely fucking hilarious. Should be a meme hat. Cheap, unusual. Decent hat, propped up by being limited. Not too bad. Cool and elaborate, plus very cheap, strange, unusual. Not bad. Hilarious and cheap, unusual. Goes great with Wild West whiskers. Surprisingly nice low-tier hat. Not a bad grab, unusual. If you have a nuts and bolts one, I'm sorry. Famous hat is famous. Looks nice, not worth it, unusual. Rare, unthemed heavy hat. Works in many loadouts. Sexy, badass. Genuinely one of the most forgettable hats in the game. Favorite of history buffs and art style respecters. Otherwise, totally fine. Released before Skyrim was memed, very different now than before. Literally nobody has this hat, was created and never worn. One of the ugliest hats around, rat is appropriate here. Heavy's version of a sniper hat, Rambo reference, is appreciated. Forgettable and a bit missized, but otherwise fine and inoffensive. Shittier, uglier, Halloween restricted version of the cadaver's cranium, bad. Often forgotten and rarely worn, this hat is kinda cool. Slick robo version of an already good hat, underrated cosmetic. Very cool double reference to both Street Fighter and XCOM. Unironically badass, great reference to Predator and great aesthetics. Fine enough if popular amongst very specific people. This early dog hat is a favorite amongst furries. Decent. Made certain TF2 fans very angry in 2012. Big respect. Very well realized Brock Simpson reference. Wish it was unusual. Hilarious name for an otherwise derivative hat. Fine but forgettable. Iconic favorite of SFM scouts everywhere. Looks fine on heavy. Genuinely incredible robo hat. Looks unusual when unique. Love it. Genuinely ugly robo hat. Looks shit when unusual. Dislike it. Fun concept, yet ruined by usual robo hat design trappings. Very over-designed, yet cool and thematically appropriate. Not bad. I guess it's a history thing. Fine enough, kinda ugly. Very funny and cute heavy hat. Also thematically appropriate. Very badass Hellboy reference ruined by Halloween restriction. Cool heavy hat that's also a neat reference, cigarette included. Great multi-purpose heavy hair, bullet is a nice bonus. Ugly, over-designed, and try-hard as hell. Not for me. Silly and cute if hard to work into loadouts. Very polarizing, personally I just think it's kinda middling. The ultimate, I'm not a neo-Nazi, but heavy hat. Very ugly and hitbox obscuring. Keep it Halloween restricted. Forgettable if neat and unthemed heavy hat. Stylish and inoffensive. Generic elf or Santa hat for Smithsmith, somehow limited. Much better limited Smithsmith heavy hat. Very cool and flexible. Silly invasion cosmetic. Forgettable if not for rarity. Cool and splashable heavy hair, plus a Big Lebowski reference. Cool Mad Max reference that's fun to paint, surprisingly flexible. Co-opted by Digital Circus fans, otherwise unremarkable. Somewhat edgy, but also cool. Fun Resident Evil 4 reference. There's like 10 of these from Jungle Inferno. Unremarkable. Cool militaristic heavy hat, surprisingly cheap, unusual as well. Second verse, same as the first. Not bad. Very funny to mix and match with other cosmetics. Long overdue Duke Nukem reference. Perfect on heavy and soldier. Another Aztec deity hat, somehow homogeneous despite its loud visual. Great mercenary grade hat, underrated and extremely splashable. Very cheap, unusual, but inoffensive and makes sense on heavy. Haha funny JoJo reference, fine enough if ruined by memes. Generic pirate hat, this time heavy flavored, cheap unusual though. Basically unwearable without the pack-a-parka, still not bad. Different styles and theming make this hat a clear standout. Token low tier heavy unusual, this time with Halloween effects. Cute and funny flexible bowler cap looks stylish on heavy. No-brainer Halloween hat for heavy with a funny name. Unwearable outside of intended set, still cute and funny enough. Great extension of existing concepts, silly and cheap unusual. One of few good hats from its crate, alarmingly square. Decent hat concept ruined by dirty texture and undesirable name. Shockingly unpopular and cheap despite layered design, spooky and edgy. It's called furry bait, but at least it's fitting thematically. Could have been added years ago without me noticing. Absolutely hysterical that it's elite grade. Its rarity is unbefitting. Smith's version of throwaway cheap Halloween hats. Neat history reference. So inoffensive and generic that it's borderline parody. Very 2020s. Surprised this one isn't elite grade. Badass and grandiose. Very cool heavy hair with layered cultural references. I like. And there we have it. This was just intended to be a little bonus video going out of the holiday season and into the new year, as once again, I did promise to make this a few months ago. But either way, I hope y'all enjoyed and weren't made too angry by my takes. Just a little bit of a heads up and a thank you to the people who may have watched this video. I want to express a sincere extension of my gratitude for the support in the past year. I realize I haven't been the most consistent, especially not to the degree that I was when I first came back to making TF2 videos, but I do intend to carry this torch forward for as long as I can, as long as you'll have me. I know I've made a lot of mistakes in the past and have definitely not been the most consistent TF2 YouTuber, but I am working to rectify that, and I want to be a TF2 YouTuber for you for as long as I can, while also managing my side channel, Opal Reviews Everything, in between major videos. Either way, thanks, hope y'all had a fantastic day before, during, and after watching. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and I'll catch you all later. Cheers! If you've played serious, paid Man vs. Machine in Team Fortress 2 for any length of time, you've probably been exposed to how different of an experience it is from the casual TF2 that everyone knows and tolerates. It really can't go overstated just how large the disparity between PvP TF2 and MBM TF2 is. Like, for some people, they log on to the game every day and never even consider queuing for casual. It's all about that MBM grind. To this end, Man vs. Machine tends to have wildly different sensibilities and metas than casual. It's a place where Engineer, Heavy, and Scout are your must picks, and Medic is generally considered optional in some missions. Also, Spy is bad in both, good for him. But seriously, when it comes to the meta of Man vs. Machine, it is night and day compared to TF2's other game modes, and this goes double for its weapons. In a game mode where you're incentivized to just vomit out huge amounts of damage and crowd control as efficiently as possible, certain weapons that are seen as niche at best and casual suddenly become much more viable. And in this video, I want to talk about a few of these. These are some bad, in massive air quotes, TF2 weapons that are great in MBM. You might want to note the air quotes I just mentioned. Some of these weapons aren't necessarily terrible and do have their merits and fans. They're just not as meta or class defining and casual as they are in MBM. Think of this more as niche weapons than straight up bad weapons. We've got a YouTube up that title you see. Also, I'm talking mainly from experience in 2 cities for this video, but if you want to weigh in on the discussion for other tours, sound off in the comments. Lastly, I know a lot of the footage you'll be seeing on this video is incredibly ping laggy. I've been dealing with some very obnoxious internet issues since I tried to come back to Team Fortress 2, and while I tried to edit around it, it will be noticeable in some places. If you're gonna comment that you don't know how I can play in this lag, that's funny, because I can't. Either way, let's dismantle some robots. To start us off, let's talk about the Brass Beast. This is a funny little gun for funny little guys. I've controversially discussed my thoughts on this weapon in the past, and how I generally view it to be Heavy's weakest unlockable primary for casual, despite its unparalleled damage output, and that's primarily due to it kneecapping an already immobile class into nearly unplayable levels of slowness just for trying to do his basic job. In casual specifically, I find the Brass Beast to be so exceptionally map and game state dependent that you're generally better off using a much more flexible Heavy primary more times than not. Its damage is huge, but that's really all it has to offer in exchange for making you a helpless, easy target to enemies. That said, this problem doesn't really exist in Man vs. Machine, where the Brass Beast very suddenly becomes an arguable top 1 heavy minigun in his entire arsenal. This is due to a confluence of factors basically making this weapon's stats line up really snugly with Heavy's role in MBM, that being a dedicated immobile damage hose that stands next to a dispenser and just vomits out bullets at robots. Heavy doesn't need to move much in MBM, and with proper backing support of his team, he can very comfortably spend entire waves in the same general area, just hosing down robots and acting as a do not pass wall of damage. The Brass Beast is very well suited to this, as it buffs Heavy's already class-defining sustained damage into absolutely absurd levels without its downsides ever really coming into play. Throw on some crit or uber canteens, and even giants won't stand a chance. The Brass Beast's other positive stat, its damage reduction below half health, is also surprisingly useful in MBM, as it allows a spun-up heavy with a few ticks of blast res to absolutely no-sell a Sentry Buster explosion and other large sources of burst damage. The Brass Beast really is a weapon that is kind of in a perfect position to flourish in MBM. Everything that makes it lackluster and casual just does not matter in a game mode where it's much easier to stay in one place for extended periods of time, and where long-term sustained damage is much more important. And hey, while you're still putting together that MBM heavy loadout, may I recommend beating some meat? Beating the enemy with some meat, that is, because on Rottenburg and other tank maps specifically, the combination of the Buffalo Steak Sandwich and the Warrior Spirit can make for a surprisingly effective tank buster on Heavy. Heavy's miniguns do significantly decrease damage to tanks by default, so if you max out firing speed on the Warrior Spirit and gobble your meat every time one shows up, you can actually put in some decent damage without having to expend your ammo supply or canteens. You should really only be doing this if cleaning up shit bots isn't a present issue though, and you're definitely not going to be a solo tank buster doing this, but as is,
It's alright.
And hey, while we're talking about funny and surprisingly effective tank buster combos, we also have the Cleaner's Carbine and the Bushwalker. This item synergy is basically the mascot for funny fringe TF2 YouTuber play in casual, allowing you to build up a Cleaner's Carbine meter and then spend it on 8 seconds of guaranteed crits in the Bushwalker, and while it's generally less valuable than the good old Girardi Chop and very, very gimmicky in casual, it actually does have legitimate utility in MBM. By maxing out swing speed on your Bushwalker and maybe investing in some Carbine upgrades, you can absolutely shred tanks with a near limitless supply of guaranteed crit Bushwalker swings. Just unload a clip of the Carbine, pop Crikey, and get to swinging. This, again, isn't terribly effective as a solo tank buster strategy, but can absolutely come in clutch alongside another dedicated tank buster to double up on damage. Also, Sniper can be an insanely effective crowd cleaner, and especially medic killer with the right weapon and upgrade. Specifically, taking the Hitman Seatmaker and outfitting it with reload speed and especially explosive headshots will allow you to hammer waves of robots with back-to-back rapid-fire headshots, while the resulting explosions clean up the surrounding mooks and rapidly refill your focus meter. You can solo entire waves of robots without having to unscope using this setup, making the Heatmaker go from a mostly forgettable if fun side grade in casual to an arguable best-in-slot option in MBM. Moving on to other classes, Scout has quite a few utilities in MBM beyond just collecting money and milking robots in this entirely safe for work context. For one, the Fan of War, typically a borderline useless throw tool in casual, for when you want to run up on an enemy and die trying to debuff them instead of just shooting them, allows Scout to provide a crucial supportive role against giant robots. Running in and smacking a giant with the Fan of War makes all incoming damage against them for the next several seconds mini crits, which sustained damage classes like Heavy and Engineer will very much appreciate. This is how you make those near lost giant robot waves turn into they're dead before they can leave the starting area giant robot waves. And what's cool is that with a bit of credit investment, the Sandman can do the same thing from a safe distance with its ball, though I personally prefer the Fan of War just because it requires no money to be spent to reach that point. On top of this, the not entirely bad, but certainly outclassed shortstop is surprisingly clutch in MBM. When combined with mini crits from your melee or crit canteens, it can be a startlingly effective mid-range damage dealer to keep the pressure on giants and tougher robots without you needing to put yourself at risk of being in close proximity to them and dying. This is on top of its faster firing speed and much faster reload than the scattergun. Plus, with the right investment, specifically in stuff like damage, firing speed, reload speed, and clip size, this thing can be a super effective tank shredder on Scout. While it does compete with the Soda Popper in this regard, especially where ghost upgrades are concerned, I wanted to talk about it for this video specifically because I feel like it's generally the weaker of these two weapons in a non-MBM context. In MBM though, they're about equal for Scout, which is pretty cool. And would you believe me if I told you that the Overdose is actually pretty good in MBM? Yeah, seriously. This is a weapon I tend to severely underestimate in casual, primarily due to the crossbow existing, but in MBM specifically, the speed boost that this weapon grants alongside maybe Mad Milk syringes can make it a surprisingly effective escape tool. Since its speed boost scales with your Uber charge percentage, and medics will often spend long portions of MBM waves sitting on full Uber, waiting for the right group of robots to pop on, you're fully ready to make like a tree and get the fuck out of there should your heal target be out damaged and die. This is one that I only found out about through my research for this video. I saw a few people on things like Reddit and Steam forums glazing the Overdose for MBM, but I can definitely see the vision. On a completely unrelated note, the Scottish Resistance is a weapon I've gone to bat for in the past. I think it's a criminally underrated and very fun sticky bomb launcher alternative, but call it a hunch that most TF2 players do not feel the same way as me. Along this line of thinking, this thing is actually definitively Demoman's best secondary in MBM. It's not uncommon to see people completely forego a grenade launcher in favor of bringing the wee booties and having an extra 25 health alongside the Scottish Resistance. And this is because, due to predictable robot pathing and the generally solved nature of MBM's missions, it's very easy to know exactly where the robots are going to be at any given time and plan accordingly. You can set multiple traps to cover multiple bases at a time with this thing, and when you combine this weapon's uncompromised damage compared to stock with its 14 max bombs out at a time and just a few seconds of crits, you can have a red carpet rolled out for pretty much any standard giant that'll send them sky high as soon as they touch the ground. This is one of the best weapons in MBM as a whole, and it's very funny that it's in the form of a casual weapon that most people forget as soon as they unlock it. And for our last two weapons in this video, let's just get extremely stupidly controversial, for completely different reasons at that. Calling the Beggar's Bazooka a bad weapon is surely a crime punishable with jail time in some states. But rest easy, I do not think this weapon is anywhere near that in casual. It's a very high-scale, high-reward rocket launcher that can absolutely aura farm with the right uses. That said, it is certainly niche and high-maintenance at the very least in casual, which is a far cry from its role in MBM, where it's actually quite literally the most powerful weapon in the entire game mode. Not best, I should stress, but most powerful. A Beggar's Bazooka with full damage and reload speed upgrades alongside some crits is literally the highest damage dealing weapon against tanks in all of MBM, and even without crits, it still handily pulls its weight. Plus, its projectile deviation doesn't really matter too much in this setting specifically, because the huge swarms of bots you'll be contending with and the general chaos of MBM means that most of your rockets will likely be connecting with something somewhere. I actually used it wrong in a lot of my footage. Most guides and experts recommend tap firing single rockets with it rather than fully loading it to output insane pounding pressure on targets, but even when I was using it incorrectly, it just felt powerful, like controlled chaos in my hands. This is a fun gun, and the things that make it semi-unwieldy and casual are exactly what make it uncontested on the mean streets of MBM. But yeah, by all objective qualifications, the gas passer belongs in this video. I should stress I don't often use this thing in MBM, and am not strongly opinionated about its place or lack of one in the meta. I'm a big boring tourist centrist of the gas passer, so please do not kill me. I promise that I'm not preaching either side. But if we're objectively discussing weapons that perform better in man vs. machine than they do in casual, then you'd be hard pressed to find a more extreme, polarizing, and community dividing example than the gas passer. A weapon so bad and casual that the community widely celebrated when it received a minor buff in the form of a bug fix, yet so overtuned in MBM that I've literally seen people send personal threats over its usage in the game mode. And all of this over a funny fart joke. What a fucking tangled web we weave. And that's it, that's the video. I realize that everything I said in this video is going to be common knowledge to any frequent MBM players, but I'm sure there are some people who watch my content who never touch the game mode in any serious capacity, so I hope at least one person learned one thing from this video. Either way, I'm excited to make more TF2 videos. Thanks, hope you have a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch you all later. Cheers!
Hey, sheep.
Hi.
I'm gonna need you to look at my stream real quick.
Hang on, I can't, 2 seconds. I have to push a soldier through a. I'm on fucking Appleseed. All right.
Oh, take your time. This'll be here for a bit. So.
Did you open some crates and get something?
Yeah, you'll need to look at what I opened.
I got 4 fucking. The lowest tier, I think. I don't know. They were all really cool cosmetics. I'm not too mad about it. I'm just. Ooh. Look at you go.
That's a strange, unusual. Look.
Oh my god, that is!
That's a strange, unusual.
That is a strange, unusual. My fucking god. What does it look like on him?
This is the first unusual hat I've ever opened, by the way.
My god.
I want to see what. Pull it up. Oh, it's a little space
There it goes.
effect. Cool.
Oh, that's really cool.
That's a strange, unusual, baby. Let's
strange,
go.
unusual.
Strange account transfer tool.
Wow, greatest item you ever got.
Oh my god, I got this guy. This guy's super expensive. This guy's an
Holy
elite grade.
shit.
What the fuck is with these crates?
What the fuck? You
Start
get.
recording.
Please, if you get the fucking Half-Life one, I need.
That guy's an elite grade. I'm making so
I
much
know he
profit
is.
on these fucking crates.
What the hell? Yeah.
The Half-Life. I got both reds. You fucking idiot.
It's-
No listings for a strange, unusual aim frame. You're telling me I potentially got the first one of these?
There's a potential for it. Or what is it? Oh, vast.
That's fucking crazy, bro.
My
Damn.
god.
What a haul. What a haul.
What a haul. My fucking god.
What a haul.